When waitress Lena Moreau's water breaks in the rain outside an upscale restaurant, she thinks her nightmare can't get worse. Then Victor DeLuca, the city's most dangerous crime boss, steps out of the shadows and takes control. Within hours, she's in his private hospital, giving birth while he refuses to leave her side. But the real terror begins when Victor discovers the truth. Lena's missing ex owes a fortune to ruthless criminals, and now she and her newborn daughter are marked for death. One desperate night will force them into an impossible alliance that changes everything. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The dinner rush at Celestine had finally begun to slow when Lena Moreau felt the first real contraction rip through her abdomen like a blade. She was refilling water glasses at table 12, smiling that practiced server smile that never quite reached her eyes when her vision went white at the edges. The crystal pitcher trembled in her hand. She set it down carefully, methodically, the way she'd learned to do everything these past 8 months, with absolute control, because the moment she let that control slip, everything would fall apart. "You all right, sweetheart?" Mrs. Chen, one of the regulars, peered up at her with genuine concern. "Perfect," Lena lied, her voice steady, even as another wave of pain built low in her back. "Just need to grab your dessert menus." She made it to the kitchen before her knees buckled. Marcus, the sous chef, caught her elbow. "Lena, Jesus, you look—" "I'm fine." She pulled away harder than necessary. "I just need a minute." But she didn't have a minute. She had maybe hours, and she was still 3 weeks from her due date, and her bank account had $47 in it, and the father of her baby had vanished 6 months ago, with her savings, and apparently a whole lot more than that. The details were still fuzzy, something about gambling debts and the wrong people and disappearing in the middle of the night, but the reality was crystal clear. She was alone, broke, and about to give birth. And she was still 5 hours from the end of her shift. Lena straightened, pressed one hand against the wall, and forced herself to breathe through the contraction. This wasn't labor, not yet. This was just practice. Braxton Hicks, her body getting ready. She still had time. She had to have time. "Table 6 needs their check," Marcus said quietly, watching her with those worried eyes everyone seemed to have lately. "And there's a new VIP in Section 4. Gregory's handling it, but I've got Section 4 tonight." Lena checked her reflection in the steel surface of the industrial refrigerator, smoothing back the dark hair that had escaped her ponytail. Her face was too pale, shadows under her eyes like bruises, but her uniform was still pressed and her apron was still clean. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman hanging on by her fingernails. "I'll take it." "Lena, maybe you should—" "I'll take it." She pushed through the kitchen doors back into the dining room, where soft jazz played over the murmur of conversation and the clink of expensive silverware against expensive plates. Celestine catered to a particular clientele: old money, new money, and the kind of money that didn't ask questions. The kind of people who tipped well if you were invisible, and tipped even better if you anticipated their needs before they voiced them. Lena had gotten very good at being invisible. Section 4 was in the back corner, the most private area of the restaurant, reserved for guests who valued discretion. As she approached, she could see Gregory hovering near the table with the particular tension of a server who knows he's out of his depth. Then she saw why. The man at the table didn't look like he belonged in Celestine. He belonged in a different century, a different world, somewhere darker and infinitely more dangerous. Even sitting down, he commanded the space around him with the kind of authority that made people step back without realizing they were doing it. Dark suit, perfectly tailored. Dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, and eyes that tracked her approach with an intensity that made her stomach drop. Victor DeLuca. Everyone in the city knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Everyone knew what he was, what he controlled, the kind of power he wielded from the shadows, and everyone with any sense of self-preservation stayed as far away from him as possible. Gregory practically fled when he saw her coming. "Good evening," Lena said, her voice somehow steady as she stopped beside the table. "I'm Lena. I'll be taking care of you tonight." Victor DeLuca didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, those dark eyes moving over her face with an assessment that felt surgical. Then his gaze dropped, briefly, almost imperceptibly, to her midsection, where her apron and the cut of her uniform mostly concealed the swell of her pregnancy. "Mostly." "Lena," he repeated, and something about the way he said her name made her skin prickle. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Another contraction was building, and she locked her knees against it. I'm working, Mr. DeLuca. Is there something I can get you? We have an excellent... Sit down, he said again, and this time he gestured to the chair across from him. You look like you're about to fall over. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. The contraction hit, and Lena couldn't quite stop the small sound that escaped her throat. Her hand went to the back of the chair, for balance, just for a second, and then Victor was on his feet, moving faster than a man his size should be able to move, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. When's the baby due? His voice was low, meant only for her. 3 weeks. She tried to pull away, but his grip was firm. Not painful, just immovable. I'm fine. It's just Braxton Hicks, false labor. It happens. How long have you been having contractions? That's not... How long, Lena? There was something in his tone that made her answer honestly. An hour. Maybe 2. He swore, soft and vicious, in Italian. Then he was guiding her into the chair, ignoring her protests, and pulling out his phone. What are you doing? Lena tried to stand, but another contraction locked her in place. I have to work. I need this job. Please, I can't. You're not working. Victor was typing something on his phone, his attention divided between the screen and her face. You're going to the hospital. I can't afford. I didn't ask what you could afford. He looked up, and the force of his gaze pinned her in place more effectively than any physical restraint. Your water hasn't broken yet. Lena shook her head, mortified that they were even having this conversation. How far apart are the contractions? I don't know. 10 minutes? 15? He nodded, still typing. My car is outside. My driver will take you to Mercy General. I'll call ahead and... No. The word came out sharper than she intended. No, thank you. I appreciate the offer, but I don't need your help. You can barely stand. I'm fine. Stop saying that. Victor leaned forward, and Lena found herself unable to look away from those dark eyes. You're not fine. You're in labor, you're alone, and you're terrified. And whatever reason you have for trying to work through this, money, pride, fear, it's not worth risking your baby's life. You don't know anything about my life. I know more than you think. His voice softened, just slightly. I know you've been working double shifts for 3 months. I know you're living in a studio apartment in Riverside that should have been condemned years ago. I know the father of your baby disappeared, and I know... He paused, something shifting in his expression. I know you're in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that doesn't go away just because you ignore it. Lena's blood went cold. What are you talking about? Not here. Victor stood, tucking his phone into his jacket. Come with me. We'll talk in the car. I'm not going anywhere with you. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. I don't know what you think you know about my life, but Daniel Reeves. Victor said the name quietly, almost gently. That's the father, isn't it? Your ex. The floor seemed to tilt sideways. Lena gripped the edge of the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. How do you... He owes money. A lot of money. To people who make me look gentle. Victor's expression was unreadable. And when someone disappears owing that kind of debt, the people they leave behind tend to inherit the consequences. I had nothing to do with whatever Daniel... I know that, but they don't care. He moved around the table, crouching down so they were eye level. Up close, she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the silver threading through his hair, the absolute certainty in his eyes. Listen to me very carefully, Lena. You're in danger. Your baby is in danger. And the only reason they haven't come for you yet is because they don't know where you are. But they will. It's just a matter of time. Why are you telling me this? Her voice cracked. What do you want from me? Right now? I want you to let me help you deliver your baby safely. He straightened, offering his hand. Everything else we can figure out later. Another contraction hit, stronger than the others, and Lena heard herself make a sound that was almost a sob. Pain radiated through her back, her hips, everywhere. She looked at Victor's outstretched hand, and she thought about all the things she'd heard about him. The violence, the power, the ruthlessness. But she also thought about the alternative, about being alone when the baby came, about whatever danger was apparently circling her life, getting closer with every passing day. She thought about how tired she was of being afraid. Lena took his hand. The rain started the moment they stepped outside. Of course it did, because this night wasn't surreal enough already without the addition of a downpour that seemed to come out of nowhere, drenching the city in seconds. Victor's driver appeared with an umbrella, but Lena was already soaked, her uniform plastered to her skin, another contraction building so fast she couldn't breathe through it. Car, now! Victor's hand was on her back, guiding her forward, and then she was sliding into leather seats in a vehicle that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. The door shut, sealing out the rain and the noise of the street, and suddenly it was just the two of them in this quiet, climate-controlled cocoon while the city blurred past the tinted windows. St. Catherine's Hospital, Victor told the driver. Tell them we're coming. I thought you said Mercy General, Lena managed, pressing both hands against her belly as the contraction peaked. St. Catherine's is better? Private. They have the best neonatal unit in the state. He was watching her with that same intense focus, like she was a problem he was actively solving. How are you feeling? Like I'm being torn in half. That's normal. How would you know? Something flickered across his face. Grief, maybe, or memory, but it was gone before she could identify it. Breathe, he said instead. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Don't hold your breath. Lena tried to follow his instructions, but the pain was everywhere now, constant and building. This is happening too fast. It's not supposed to happen this fast. First baby? She nodded, unable to speak. It varies. Victor pulled out his phone again, typing rapidly. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's not. Either way, you're going to be fine. You can't know that. Yes, he said, with absolute certainty. I can. The drive felt like it took hours and seconds simultaneously. Lena was dimly aware of Victor making calls, giving orders in that low, commanding voice that expected immediate obedience. She was aware of the city lights streaking past the window, of the rain hammering against the roof, of the way her body seemed to have taken over completely, independent of her will or her fear. And she was aware of Victor sitting beside her with a stillness that was somehow more powerful than any amount of movement. He didn't try to touch her, didn't offer empty reassurances. He just existed, solid and unshakable, and somehow that helped more than anything else could have. Why are you doing this? Lena asked when the contraction finally eased enough for her to speak. You don't know me. No, Victor agreed, but I know what it's like to be alone when you need help. I find that hard to believe. His smile was brief, humorless. Believe what you want. The car pulled up to a private entrance at St. Catherine's, where a medical team was already waiting with a wheelchair. Lena barely registered the transition from car to hospital, from the rain-soaked night to the too bright fluorescent hallway. Someone was asking her questions, name, date of birth, insurance information, and she was answering on autopilot while Victor spoke quietly to a woman in a white coat who kept nodding and making notes. Then she was in a room, private, spacious, nothing like the crowded public hospital she'd been planning to use, and nurses were helping her into a gown, hooking her up to monitors, checking her vital signs and the baby's heartbeat. You're dilated to 6 centimeters, the doctor said, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Patel, who spoke with calm authority. This baby is definitely coming tonight, probably within the next few hours. Hours? Lena's voice came out small, frightened. I thought, I'm not ready. I don't have anything ready. You have time. Dr. Patel squeezed her hand. Try to relax. Your body knows what to do. But Lena couldn't relax because Victor was still there, standing by the window with his phone in his hand, and this whole situation was insane. She was about to give birth in a private hospital room that she definitely couldn't afford, with a crime boss she'd served dinner to exactly once, acting like her personal guardian. And somewhere out there were people who apparently wanted her dead because of debts her ex had left behind. You should go, she told Victor when the doctor left. You've done enough, more than enough. I can take it from here. He looked at her for a long moment. Do you have anyone? Someone you want me to call? No. No one at all? Lena closed her eyes against the truth of that. My parents are dead. I don't have siblings. My friends... She laughed, but it came out bitter. I don't really have those either. I work too much. What about the father? He made his choice. Her hands curled into fists around the thin hospital blanket. I'm on my own. I've been on my own. It's fine. That word again. What? Fine. Victor moved away from the window, closer to the bed. You use it like armor. Like if you say it enough times, it might become true. Don't analyze me. You don't have the right. You're correct. I don't. He pulled a chair over and sat down, which was somehow more alarming than if he'd remained standing. But I'm not leaving you alone to do this. Why? The question burst out of her, desperate and raw. Why do you care? What do you get out of this? Another contraction hit before he could answer, and this one was different, deeper, more urgent, accompanied by pressure that made Lena cry out. The monitors started beeping, and suddenly the room was full of nurses, and Dr. Patel was back, checking her progress with swift, practiced movements. You're at 9 centimeters, the doctor announced. We're getting close. How are you doing with pain management? Do you want an epidural? Is it too late? We can try, but it'll be close. The anesthesiologist is on his way. Lena tried to think through the pain, tried to weigh options, but everything was happening too fast. I can't decide. Look at me. Victor's voice cut through the chaos, calm and steady. She found his eyes, dark and certain, and held on. Breathe. You don't have to decide anything right now except the next breath, then the next. One thing at a time. Easy for you to say. I've been shot 4 times. I know something about pain. Despite everything, Lena almost laughed. That's supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. His expression didn't change, but something in his voice softened. You're stronger than you think you are. You're going to get through this. You don't know that. Yes, he said again, with that same unshakable certainty. I do. The anesthesiologist arrived, but by the time he'd prepped the epidural, Lena was at 10 centimeters, and Dr. Patel was telling her it was too late. The baby was coming now. There was no time for pain relief, no time for anything except the overwhelming, unstoppable force of her body doing what it had been designed to do. I can't, Lena gasped as another contraction seized her. I can't do this. It's too much. You're doing it. Victor was on his feet now, standing beside the bed where she could see him. He'd rolled up his shirt sleeves at some point, and there were scars on his forearms, old wounds, faded but visible, proof that he'd survived things that should have killed him. You're already doing it. Just keep going. I'm scared. I know. What if something goes wrong? Then we'll handle it. He reached out, offering his hand. But you're not alone. Lena grabbed his hand without thinking, squeezing hard enough that it should have hurt. But Victor didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He just held on, solid and immovable, while the world narrowed to pain and pressure and Dr. Patel's voice telling her to push. So she pushed, and somewhere in the middle of it, she stopped thinking about Victor DeLuca, the crime boss, and started thinking of him as just Victor, the man who was here when no one else was. The man whose hand she was probably breaking. The man who kept his eyes on her face and didn't look away, even when things got messy and raw and undignified in the way childbirth always was. I can see the head, Dr. Patel announced. One more big push, Lena. You're almost there. I can't. You can. Victor's voice steady and sure. One more. Then it's done. Lena bore down with everything she had left, and the world exploded into sensation so overwhelming she couldn't separate pain from relief from triumph. And then, suddenly, impossibly, there was a new sound in the room. Crying. High and indignant and absolutely, perfectly alive. It's a girl, Dr. Patel said, smiling as she lifted a tiny, wriggling creature covered in vernix and blood. A beautiful, healthy girl. Lena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only watch as they cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket and then placed her on Lena's chest, this impossible miracle that had somehow come from her body. The baby's face was scrunched and red, her tiny fists waving, and when Lena touched her cheek, so soft, softer than anything, those unfocused eyes seemed to look right at her. Hi, Lena whispered, and her voice broke on the word. Hi, baby. I'm your mom. The baby made a small sound, and Lena started crying in earnest, huge, gulping sobs that shook her whole body. Relief and terror and love so fierce it felt like dying, all tangled together until she couldn't tell them apart. She'd forgotten Victor was there until she felt him move, stepping back to give her space. When she looked up, his expression was complicated. Grief and longing and something else she couldn't name, all carefully controlled but visible if you knew how to look. "Thank you," Lena said, the words completely inadequate. "For everything, I couldn't have... You would have managed." But his voice was rough, almost gentle. "You're tougher than you give yourself credit for." "Still, thank you." He nodded once, then turned toward the door. "I should go. You need to rest." "Victor?" She didn't know why she called out to him, didn't know what she wanted to say. But he stopped, waiting. "What you said earlier about Daniel's debts, about me being in danger, was that true?" The kindness left his face, replaced by something harder, colder. "Yes." "How much does he owe?" $300,000. The number hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying. Lena looked down at her daughter, sleeping peacefully against her chest, and felt fear settle into her bones. "They'll come for me," she said quietly. "For us." "Not if I can help it." Victor's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Get some rest, Lena. We'll talk more in the morning." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. And Lena was alone with her daughter, in a hospital room she couldn't afford, with a future that had just become infinitely more complicated. But when she looked down at her baby's face, at those tiny fingers curled around her thumb, she felt something shift inside her, something fierce and protective and absolutely unbreakable. She'd been alone for so long, surviving on scraps and willpower. She'd let fear dictate her choices, let Daniel's abandonment define her worth. She'd made herself small and invisible, hoping that if she just stayed quiet enough, the world would leave her alone. But that ended tonight. Whatever came next, debt collectors, danger, impossible choices, she would face it. Not because she was brave, but because she didn't have a choice. This baby needed her to be more than afraid. She needed to be strong. Lena kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in that new baby smell, and made a silent promise. Whatever it took, she would protect this child. She would give her the life she deserved, even if that meant accepting help from the most dangerous man in the city, even if that meant becoming someone she'd never imagined being. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city clean, and Lena held her daughter close and tried not to think about the morning. Morning came with pale sunlight filtering through the hospital blinds and the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Lena woke disoriented, her body aching in places she didn't know could ache, until she looked down and saw the tiny bundle sleeping in the bassinet beside her bed. Then everything came rushing back. The labor, the pain, Victor's hand in hers, and that impossible number hanging over her head like a guillotine. $300,000. She must have made a sound because the baby stirred, her little face scrunching up in preparation for crying. Lena reached for her instinctively, and the moment she held her daughter against her chest, something in the world clicked into place. Nothing else mattered. Not the debt, not the danger, not the impossibility of her situation. Just this warm weight in her arms, this small person who depended on her completely. "You need a name," Lena whispered, touching the baby's soft cheek. She'd spent months trying out possibilities, but nothing had felt right. Now, looking at her daughter's face in the morning light, one name surfaced with sudden clarity. Isla. "Your name is Isla." The baby yawned, a tiny sound that made Lena's heart contract. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Lena tensed, pulling Isla closer, but it was just a nurse, different from the ones last night, younger, with kind eyes and efficient movements. "Good morning. How are we feeling?" The nurse checked the monitors, made notes on a tablet. "Any pain? Excessive bleeding?" "I'm okay." Lena shifted, trying to find a position that didn't hurt. "A little sore." "That's normal. We'll get you something for the pain." The nurse smiled at Isla. "She's beautiful. Have you tried nursing yet?" They spent the next 20 minutes working through the mechanics of breastfeeding, which turned out to be significantly harder than Lena had expected. Isla kept losing the latch, getting frustrated, and Lena felt like she was failing at something that should have been instinctive. "Don't worry," the nurse said, seeing her expression. "It takes practice. You're both learning." After the nurse left, Lena tried again, This time Isla latched properly, and Lena felt a strange pull deep in her belly as her daughter nursed. It hurt and felt right simultaneously, which seemed to be the theme of everything lately. She was still trying to figure out the logistics when the door opened again. This time it was Dr. Patel, looking considerably more rested than she had at 3 in the morning. "How's our new mother?" The doctor did a quick examination, professional and thorough. "Everything looks good. You and Isla can probably go home tomorrow if there are no complications." Home. Lena thought about her studio apartment with its leaking ceiling and broken radiator, about the crib she hadn't bought yet because she couldn't afford it, about the 300,000 reasons why going home might be the worst idea possible. "Actually," Lena said slowly, "about the bill. I don't have insurance, and I know this hospital's expensive. I can set up a payment plan, but it'll take time. It's taken care of." Dr. Patel made a note on her chart, not quite meeting Lena's eyes. "What do you mean, taken care of?" "The bill has been paid in full, including all prenatal care you might have missed, and a 2-week postpartum follow-up program." Lena's stomach dropped. "By who?" But she already knew the answer. Dr. Patel left, and Lena sat there holding Isla, anger and gratitude warring in her chest. She should be grateful. Victor had given her something she desperately needed and couldn't have afforded otherwise. But accepting his money meant accepting his help, which meant owing him, which meant getting pulled deeper into whatever world he inhabited. She was still processing this when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Need to talk. Can I come by this afternoon?" Victor Lena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could say no. She could tell him to stay away, figure this out on her own, pretend last night had never happened. But that would be stupid and dangerous, and she was done lying to herself about what she could handle alone. "Okay, after lunch." His response came immediately. "See you at 2. The hours until 2 o'clock crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lena tried to focus on Isla, learning to change diapers, attempting to nurse again, marveling at every tiny expression that crossed her daughter's face. But her mind kept circling back to the conversation she knew was coming. What did Victor want? Why had he really helped her? And what exactly did he expect in return? At precisely 2 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Lena called for him to enter, and Victor stepped into the room looking like he'd just come from a board meeting. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, that aura of controlled power that seemed to follow him everywhere. But his eyes went immediately to Isla, sleeping in Lena's arms, and something in his expression softened. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you." Lena adjusted the blanket around Isla's face. "And thank you for paying the hospital bill. You didn't have to do that." "I know." Victor pulled the visitor's chair closer to the bed, sitting with the same deliberate care he seemed to apply to everything. "But I wanted to." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "I lost a daughter once, a long time ago." Lena's breath caught. "I'm sorry." "She was 6 months old. Complications from a heart defect we didn't know she had." His voice was steady, but Lena could hear the old grief underneath. "My wife and I were at a restaurant when she stopped breathing. By the time we got to the hospital, it was too late." "Victor, I'm not telling you this for sympathy." He leaned forward, hands clasped between his knees. "I'm telling you so you understand. When I saw you last night trying to work through labor, alone and afraid, I couldn't walk away. Not from that." Lena didn't know what to say. This glimpse of Victor's humanity was somehow more unsettling than his reputation for violence. "What happened to your wife?" she asked finally. "She left. Couldn't handle the grief. Couldn't handle me." His smile was brief, bitter. "That was 20 years ago. I haven't spoken to her since." "I'm sorry," Lena said again, because what else was there to say? "Don't be. I made my choices, and she made hers." Victor straightened, and the vulnerability disappeared behind his usual mask of control. "But we need to talk about Daniel, about what he's left you with." There it was, the real reason for this visit. "I don't know anything about his debts," Lena said quickly. "He left 6 months ago, didn't tell me where he was going or why, just disappeared in the middle of the night." "He's alive." Lena's head snapped up. "What?" "Daniel's alive. hiding in Atlantic City, working under an assumed name at a casino. Victor's expression was unreadable. He knows about the baby, and he knows what kind of danger he's put you in. The rage that flooded through Lena was so intense it took her breath away. He knows? He knows I'm pregnant and he's just hiding, letting me deal with this alone? He's a coward. Victor's voice was flat, factual, and cowards rarely change. Who does he owe the money to? The Kozlov brothers, Russian mob operating out of Brooklyn. Victor's jaw tightened. They're not like me, Lena. They don't negotiate, they don't show mercy, and they don't care who gets hurt as long as they get paid. Lena looked down at Isla, sleeping peacefully against her chest, and felt fear settle into her bones. How long before they find me? You've been lucky so far. Daniel used a fake name for the apartment lease, paid cash, kept you off the grid, but luck runs out. Victor pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, setting it on the bedside table. I can help, but you need to understand what that means. What's in the envelope? Options. He stood, moving to the window where he could look out at the city. The first option is money. Enough to disappear, new identity, new city, enough cash to start over somewhere far from here. You take Isla and you run, and you hope the Kozlovs never find you. And the second option? Victor turned to face her, and in the afternoon light she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver in his hair, the weight of decades spent in a world most people only knew from movies. You accept my protection. You and Isla move into one of my properties, fully secured, full-time security detail. I handle the Kozlovs, either through negotiation or other means. You don't pay me back. You don't owe me anything except your word that you'll stay put until the situation is resolved. That's it? You protect me out of the goodness of your heart? I don't have a good heart. His voice was matter of fact. But I have resources and I have principles. One of those principles is that children don't pay for their parents' mistakes. Lena studied his face, trying to read the truth behind his words. What's the catch? The catch is that once you're under my protection, people will assume you're connected to me. That comes with its own risks, its own complications. Victor moved closer to the bed, his voice dropping. And the other catch is that I won't lie to you about who I am or what I do. You'll see things, know things, that you can't unsee or unknow. That's the price of safety in my world. What about the third option? There is no third option. His expression was grim. Not one that keeps you and Isla alive. The baby stirred in Lena's arms, making small sounds in her sleep. Lena looked down at her daughter's face, at the tiny perfection of her features, and felt the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders. Run and spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, or accept help from a dangerous man and enter a world she'd spent her whole life avoiding. I need time to think, she said finally. You don't have time. The Kozlovs put feelers out last week. They're getting close. How close? Close enough that they know Daniel had a girlfriend. Close enough that they're asking questions at restaurants in the area where you work. Victor's voice was steady, but there was urgency underneath. You have maybe a week, possibly less, before they find you. Lena's hands trembled. She set Isla carefully in the bassinet, needing a moment to think without the weight of her daughter in her arms. If I accept your protection, what happens to Daniel? What do you want to happen to him? The question surprised her. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. Victor sat down again, watching her carefully. He left you pregnant and alone to face consequences he created. If you want him brought here, I can arrange that. If you want him to stay hidden, I can arrange that too. And if you want him to face the Kozlovs himself, no. The word came out sharp, instinctive. Lena took a breath, trying to organize her thoughts. I'm angry at him. I'm furious, but I don't want him dead. Even after everything he's done? Even then. Lena looked at Isla, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet. She might want to know her father someday. I can't take that choice away from her. Something shifted in Victor's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. You're better than he deserves. I'm practical. Lena turned back to him, and for the first time since this conversation started, she felt steady, clear. If I accept your protection, I want conditions. Victor's eyebrow rose slightly. Conditions. I'm not a prisoner. I can work, I can see people, I can have a life. within reason and with security. I want regular updates on the situation. No hiding things from me because you think I can't handle it. Agreed. And when this is over, when the debt is settled and the danger is gone, I get to leave. No strings, no obligations, no expectation that I owe you anything beyond basic human decency. Victor was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those dark eyes. You drive a hard bargain for someone with no leverage. I have plenty of leverage. You clearly want to help me, which means you need me to say yes. Lena crossed her arms, ignoring the pull of sore muscles. So those are my terms. Take them or leave them. A smile tugged at the corner of Victor's mouth. Brief, genuine, almost admiring. All right, I accept your conditions. Just like that? Just like that. He stood, pulling out his phone. I'll have a team here tomorrow morning to transport you and Isla to the safe house. Pack light. Everything you need will be provided. Wait. Lena's heart was racing now that the decision was made. What about my apartment, my things? What do you need from it? She thought about the studio apartment with its sparse furniture and thrift store decorations. Nothing important. Some clothes, maybe. Photos. Give me the address and a list. I'll have someone collect it. Victor was already typing on his phone, efficient and precise. What about your job? I quit. The words came out easier than she expected. I can't go back there anyway, can I? No. His voice softened slightly. I'm sorry. Don't be. I hated that job. Lena surprised herself by laughing. I hated smiling at people who didn't see me, hated pretending to be fine when I was falling apart. At least now I can be honest about my life being a disaster. It's not a disaster, it's just complicated. That's a generous interpretation. Victor pocketed his phone, then reached into his jacket again and pulled out a different envelope. Smaller, thicker. This is for immediate expenses. Clothes for you and the baby, supplies, whatever you need until the move tomorrow. Lena took the envelope reluctantly, feeling the weight of cash inside. How much is this? 5,000. That's too much. It's barely anything. Victor moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Lena, I need you to understand something. The people coming for you don't negotiate. They don't care about your story or your circumstances. They only care about the debt. So when my security team tells you to do something, you do it. No questions, no hesitation. Because the difference between following instructions and thinking you know better could be the difference between your daughter having a mother or not. The words hit like cold water. Lena nodded slowly. I understand. Good. He opened the door, then looked back one more time. She really is beautiful. Isla. It's a good name. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with her sleeping daughter and an envelope full of cash and a future that had just shifted into something completely unrecognizable. She picked up Isla, needing the weight and warmth of her, and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, all steel and glass and millions of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to track. Somewhere out there, the Kozlov brothers were looking for her. Somewhere out there, Daniel was hiding. And somewhere out there, Victor DeLuca was rearranging the pieces of his world to make room for her and her daughter. What have I gotten us into? Lena whispered against Isla's head. The baby made a small sound, not quite awake, and Lena felt that fierce protectiveness surge through her again. Whatever came next, she would handle it. She would adapt. She would survive. Because she didn't have any other choice. The rest of the day passed in a blur of nurses and feeding attempts, and the strange, exhausting work of caring for a newborn. By evening, Lena felt like she'd been awake for a week straight. Every muscle ached, her breasts were sore from nursing, and Isla seemed to have developed an uncanny ability to wake up the moment Lena started to drift off. But there were also unexpected moments of grace. The way Isla's tiny hand wrapped around Lena's finger, the sound of her breathing, soft and steady. The weight of her sleeping on Lena's chest, warm and trusting and absolutely perfect. Around 9 o'clock, another knock at the door. Lena tensed automatically now, every unexpected sound setting off alarm bells. But it was just a delivery person with an enormous bouquet of flowers, white roses, and something purple she didn't recognize. For Mr. DeLuca, the delivery person said, setting the vase on the windowsill. He said to tell you congratulations. After they left, Lena found the card tucked among the roses. The handwriting was precise, controlled, revealing nothing. For new beginnings. V. She touched one of the rose petals, soft as Isla's skin, and felt something shift in her chest. Victor DeLuca was a dangerous man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, but he was also the man who'd held her hand through labor, who'd paid her hospital bills, who'd looked at her daughter with grief and longing and something that might have been hope. Who the hell was he really? And who was she becoming that she was starting to trust him? Lena didn't have answers to those questions. All she knew was that tomorrow, her life would change again. Tomorrow, she would leave this hospital room and step into Victor's world, with all its dangers and complications and unknown variables. Tomorrow, she would officially become someone worth protecting. The thought should have terrified her. And it did, a little. But underneath the fear was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. For months, she'd been carrying the weight of her situation alone, too proud or too stubborn to ask for help. But pride didn't keep babies safe. Stubbornness didn't pay debts or stop dangerous men. Sometimes survival meant accepting help from unexpected sources. Sometimes it meant making deals with devils and hoping they kept their word. Lena looked at the roses, at the card, at her sleeping daughter. Then she picked up her phone and sent Victor a message. "Thank you for the flowers. See you tomorrow." His response came almost immediately. "Sleep if you can. It's going to be a long day." She set the phone aside and climbed carefully back into bed, arranging pillows so she could keep Isla close. The baby was still sleeping, her face peaceful in the dim light from the hallway. Lena watched her breathe, counting each tiny rise and fall of her chest, and tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring. A safe house, security guards, a life in hiding while Victor handled the Kozlov brothers through means she probably didn't want to know about. It was insane. All of it. A week ago, she'd been a waitress worrying about making rent. Now she was under the protection of one of the most powerful crime bosses in the city, with a newborn daughter and a price on her head and absolutely no idea what came next. But when she looked at Isla's face, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was keeping her safe. Everything else was just details. Lena closed her eyes, listening to the soft sounds of the hospital at night. Footsteps in the hallway, distant conversations, the beep of monitors in other rooms. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. Tomorrow, she would have to be strong and smart and brave in ways she'd never had to be before. But tonight, for just a few more hours, she could pretend the world was simple. That she was just a new mother with her baby, tired and sore and overwhelmed, but fundamentally okay. Tonight, she could hold Isla close and breathe and exist in this small bubble of safety before reality crashed back in. So that's what she did. She held her daughter and listened to her breathe and tried not to think about the men who wanted to hurt them, or the man who'd promised to keep them safe, or the impossible tangle her life had become. She just held Isla, and for now that was enough. When morning came with its harsh fluorescent light and the bustle of shift change, Lena woke to find a text from an unknown number. "Team arrives at 10 a.m. Be ready. Marcus." Not Victor. Someone who worked for him. Someone whose job was apparently to pack up traumatized new mothers and move them to secret locations. Lena looked at the clock. 8:30. She had an hour and a half to get herself and Isla ready for whatever came next. She fed the baby, changed her diaper, and tried to make herself look presentable with hospital sink and the clean clothes someone had thoughtfully left in the bathroom. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was pale, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and hair that desperately needed washing. She looked like what she was, a woman running out of options. Dr. Patel came by at 9:15 to do a final check and sign the discharge papers. "You're healing well," the doctor said, examining her with professional efficiency. "But take it easy for the next few weeks. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity, and call if you have any concerning symptoms, fever, excessive bleeding, anything that doesn't feel right." "I will." Lena accepted the packet of discharge instructions and prescriptions, knowing she probably wouldn't need them. Victor's people would handle all of that. The thought should have bothered her more than it did. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. A man entered, late 30s, military bearing, eyes that scanned the room automatically, cataloging exits and potential threats. He was followed by a woman about Lena's age, with kind eyes and capable hands. "Miss Moreau, I'm Marcus Chen." The man's voice was professional, neutral. "This is Sofia Rodriguez. We'll be handling your transport and getting you settled. Okay. Lena pulled Isla closer, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. Where are we going? Safe house in Westchester. Private property, full security detail, everything you and the baby need. Sophia moved to the bassinet, checking the supplies with practiced efficiency. We've got a car seat installed, diapers, formula, just in case, everything for the trip. How long is the drive? About 40 minutes without traffic? Marcus was already gathering the few items Lena had accumulated. The flowers, her phone charger, the envelope of cash. We should leave soon. Beat the lunch rush. Everything was happening so fast. Lena felt like she was being swept along by a current too strong to fight. Do I have time to change her? She'll need to eat soon. Feed her now, Sophia suggested. It'll keep her calm during the drive. So Lena sat back down and nursed Isla while Marcus and Sophia efficiently packed up the room, removing any trace that she'd been there. It felt surreal, watching these strangers dismantle her brief stay with such casual competence. Do you do this often? Lena asked. Move people around like this? Sophia glanced at Marcus, some silent communication passing between them. Sometimes, she said finally, when the situation calls for it. And this situation calls for it? Yes. Marcus's voice was flat, brooking no argument. It definitely does. 20 minutes later, Lena was being wheeled out of the hospital with Isla in her arms, Sophia beside her and Marcus scouting ahead. They took a service elevator to the parking garage, where a black SUV with tinted windows waited. The car seat was exactly where Sophia had promised, properly installed and ready. Getting Isla into it while the baby fussed and Lena's body protested, every movement was an exercise in frustration, but eventually they managed. Lena climbed into the back seat beside her daughter, and Sophia got in on the other side while Marcus took the driver's seat. Seatbelt, Marcus said, meeting Lena's eyes in the rearview mirror. She buckled up, and then they were moving, pulling out of the parking garage into bright morning sunlight. Lena watched the city slide past the tinted windows, the hospital, the neighborhood she'd worked in, the life she was leaving behind. Everything looked different from inside this vehicle, separate and distant, like watching a movie of someone else's life. Can I ask you something? Lena said after a few minutes of silence. Depends on the question, Marcus replied. How long have you worked for Victor? Another glance in the rearview mirror. 12 years? And he's, what? A good boss? Sophia made a sound that might have been a laugh. He's fair. Loyal to the people who are loyal to him. Doesn't ask us to do anything he wouldn't do himself. That's not exactly reassuring given what he does. Maybe not. Sophia turned to look at her directly. But it's honest. And in our world, honesty counts for a lot. They drove in silence for a while. Isla slept, lulled by the motion of the car, and Lena watched the city give way to suburbs, then to areas with more space between buildings. Trees appeared, then stone walls, then gates with security cameras. Almost there, Marcus said. The SUV turned onto a private road, following it through dense woods until they emerged into a clearing. The house, though calling it a house felt inadequate, was massive, all glass and stone and modern architecture that probably cost more than Lena would make in several lifetimes. The grounds were immaculate, and she could see security cameras positioned strategically around the perimeter. This is the safe house? Lena's voice came out small. One of them. Marcus pulled up to the front entrance, where another man in a dark suit waited. Mr. DeLuca owns several properties. This one's the most secure. The man at the entrance opened Lena's door, offering his hand to help her out. She accepted it, moving carefully, her body still sore from childbirth. Sophia got Isla out of the car seat with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times, and then they were walking into the house. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, expensive furniture, art on the walls that was probably original. But what struck Lena most was how quiet it was. No traffic noise, no sirens, no city sounds at all. Just silence and space, and the kind of luxury she'd only ever seen in magazines. Your rooms are upstairs, Sophia said, leading the way to a grand staircase. Nursery's connected to the master bedroom. We've stocked everything you should need, but if there's anything else, just ask. The rooms were beautiful. The master bedroom had a king-sized bed, a sitting area, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the woods, and the nursery. Lena stepped into it and felt tears prick her eyes. It was perfect. Soft colors, a crib that looked like it cost a fortune, a rocking chair by the window, shelves already filled with books and toys. "This is too much," Lena whispered. "Mr. DeLuca wanted to make sure you were comfortable." Sophia set Isla's car seat down gently. "There's a kitchen downstairs fully stocked. Security monitors the perimeter 24/7, but they'll stay out of your way unless there's an issue. And I'll be here during the day to help with whatever you need." "You're staying here?" "For now, yes, until you're settled." Sophia smiled, and it transformed her face from professional to warm. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're safe here. That's what matters." After Sophia left to let her get settled, Lena stood in the middle of the nursery holding Isla and trying to process everything. 48 hours ago, she'd been a waitress living in a studio apartment, invisible and alone. Now she was standing in a mansion with a full-time helper and security guards, under the protection of a man who could apparently make anything happen with a phone call. It was too much, all of it. But when Isla started to fuss, Lena's body took over. She changed the baby's diaper, fed her, walked her around the room until she settled. The mundane tasks grounded her, reminded her that beneath all the luxury and danger and impossible circumstances, she was still just a mother taking care of her baby. That was real. The rest was just complication. Lena put Isla down in the crib, which had the softest sheets she'd ever felt, and watched her daughter sleep. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the woods surrounding the property, at the security cameras hidden among the trees, at the gate in the distance that kept the world out. She was safe here. Isla was safe. But safety came with a price, and Lena was beginning to understand just how high that price might be. The first week passed in a haze of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Isla had her days and nights confused, which meant Lena spent most of the dark hours pacing the nursery while her daughter screamed, trying every trick Sophia suggested and feeling like a failure when nothing worked. By the time dawn broke, she'd be exhausted, and then Isla would finally sleep for 3 blissful hours while Lena lay in bed too wired to do the same. Sophia was patient, endlessly so, showing Lena how to swaddle properly, how to recognize different types of cries, how to trust her instincts even when everything felt impossible. But there were moments, usually around 3 in the morning, when Isla had been crying for an hour straight and Lena's body ached and her mind felt like it was unraveling, when she wondered if accepting Victor's help had been a mistake. Then she'd remember the alternative, the Kozlov brothers, $300,000. The studio apartment with its broken locks and thin walls where anyone could find her. No. This was better. This had to be better. Victor himself was conspicuously absent. He called every few days, brief conversations where he asked about Isla and assured Lena that progress was being made on the situation, but he never came to the house. Lena told herself she was relieved. The last thing she needed was the complication of seeing him, of remembering the way he'd held her hand through labor, of trying to reconcile the dangerous man everyone warned her about with the person who'd looked at her daughter with such careful tenderness. But she'd be lying if she said she didn't wonder where he was, what he was doing, whether handling the Kozlov brothers meant negotiation or something darker. On the 8th day, Lana was in the nursery trying to get Isla down for a nap when she heard raised voices downstairs. Her heart jumped into her throat. She grabbed Isla from the crib and moved to the door, listening. "Can't just show up here unannounced." That was Marcus, his voice tight with tension. "I'm not some random threat. I'm her family." A woman's voice, unfamiliar, sharp with anger. "You can't keep me from seeing her." Lena's stomach dropped. She didn't have family. Her parents were dead. She had no siblings, no cousins she'd kept in touch with, which meant she was down the stairs before she'd made a conscious decision to move. Isla clutched against her chest. In the foyer, Marcus stood between a blonde woman in her 50s and the rest of the house, his body language radiating warning. The woman was well-dressed, expensive coat and heels, but her eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. "I'm not family," Lena said, and both of them turned to look at her. "I don't know who you are." The woman's face crumpled. "I'm Patricia. Patricia Reeves, Daniel's mother." Of course Daniel's mother would show up now, when Lena's life couldn't possibly get more complicated. "How did you find me?" Lena kept her distance, trusting Marcus to stay between them. "I have friends, connections." Patricia's voice shook. "I heard about the baby. I heard Daniel got you into trouble and then ran. I had to see for myself. I had to—" Her eyes went to Isla, and something in her expression shifted. "Is that her? Is that my granddaughter?" "You need to leave." Marcus's voice was flat, but Lena could hear the threat underneath. "Now." "Wait," Lena surprised herself. "It's okay, Marcus. Give us a minute." "Miss Moreau, just stay close." She looked at Patricia, really looked at her, and saw genuine anguish in the woman's face. "You have 5 minutes. Then you leave and you don't come back without calling first." Marcus didn't look happy, but he stepped aside. Patricia moved forward slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal, her eyes fixed on Isla. "She's beautiful," Patricia whispered. "She has Daniel's eyes." Lena had been trying not to see the resemblance, but it was there. Something in the shape of Isla's face, the set of her features. A reminder that no matter how much she wanted to pretend otherwise, Daniel was part of this. "What do you want?" Lena asked. "I want to help. I have money. Not enough to pay off the debt, but enough to get you somewhere safe. You and the baby can come stay with me in Connecticut. I have security. I have resources. I'm already somewhere safe." Patricia's eyes swept the foyer, taking in the expensive furnishings, the security cameras, the obvious wealth. "You're with Victor DeLuca." It wasn't a question. "Do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into?" "I know exactly what I've gotten into, which is more than I can say for your son." The words hit like a slap. Patricia flinched, but she didn't back down. "Daniel made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but he's still my child. And that baby," she gestured to Isla, "that baby is my blood, my family. You can't keep her from me." "Watch me." Lena's voice came out cold, harder than she'd known she could sound. "Daniel left me pregnant and alone to deal with debts he created. He knew I was in danger and he ran. He doesn't get to be a father now, and you don't get to be a grandmother." "You can't mean that." "I absolutely mean that." Lena adjusted Isla in her arms, feeling the baby's warm weight against her chest. "You want to be involved in her life? Then tell me where Daniel is. Help me fix the situation he created. Otherwise, get out and don't come back." Patricia's face went pale. "I don't know where he is. I swear I don't. He won't talk to me. He's too afraid." "Afraid?" Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He should be afraid. He should be terrified. But instead of facing what he's done, he's hiding like a coward, while other people clean up his mess." "Please," Patricia's voice broke. "Please don't shut me out. I know my son failed you. I know he's weak and selfish and everything you think he is, but that baby is innocent. She deserves to know her grandmother." For a moment, Lena almost softened. She could see the genuine pain in Patricia's eyes, the desperation of a mother who'd raised a son who'd turned out badly despite her best efforts. But then she thought about the night she'd spent alone and terrified, about going into labor with no one beside her, about the $300,000 debt hanging over her head like a guillotine. "Your 5 minutes are up," Lena said quietly. "Marcus will show you out." "Lena, please!" "Out, now, or I'll have you removed." Patricia stood there for another moment, tears running down her carefully made-up face, then turned and walked toward the door. She stopped at the threshold, looking back one more time. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything my son put you through. You deserved better." Then she was gone, and Lena was left standing in the foyer with Marcus and a baby who was starting to fuss. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "No." Lena's hands were shaking. "But I will be." She went back upstairs and fed Isla, trying to calm the anger still churning in her chest. Daniel's mother. Of all the people to show up unannounced, it had to be her. Another complication, another person with claims on Isla's life. Another reminder that Lena's choices affected more than just herself. Her phone rang just as she was putting Isla down for a nap. Victor's name on the screen. "Your security team called me," he said without preamble. "Patricia Reeves showed up at the house. She's gone now." "I know." I also know what you said to her. There was something in his voice she couldn't identify. That took courage. It took anger. Lena sat down in the rocking chair, suddenly exhausted. She acted like she had rights, like I owed her access to Isla just because we share DNA with her disaster of a son. Do you want me to make sure she doesn't come back? There was a weight to the question. Lena thought about what make sure might mean in Victor's world and felt cold. Just keep her away. Nothing more than that. All right. A pause. How are you holding up? Really? I'm tired. Isla won't sleep. I can't sleep. Everything hurts, but we're alive and safe, so I guess I'm doing better than the alternative. Sophia says you're doing well. Better than most first-time mothers. Sophia is very kind and also a liar. But Lena felt herself smile despite everything. When are you coming by? The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise Victor. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You want me to come by? He asked carefully. I don't know. Maybe. It's strange living in your house, using your resources, being protected by your people, but never actually seeing you. Lena pushed the rocking chair into motion with her foot. It feels like I'm in debt to a ghost. You're not in debt to me at all. That's not how it feels. Another silence, longer this time. Then Victor said, I'll come by tomorrow, if that's all right with you. Okay, tomorrow. He hung up and Lena sat there in the quiet nursery, wondering what she'd just invited into her life. Having Victor at the hospital had been one thing, a crisis, an emergency, circumstances that pushed normal boundaries aside. But having him here, in the house where she was living, where Isla was sleeping, that felt different, more deliberate, more dangerous. But she'd meant what she said. It did feel strange being protected by someone she never saw. And despite everything she knew about him, despite all the warnings and the reputation and the violence she knew he was capable of, part of her wanted to see him again. That was probably a problem. Lena pushed the thought aside and went to take a shower while Isla slept. The master bathroom was ridiculous. A shower the size of her old apartment, a tub that could fit 3 people, heated floors, and a sound system, and more luxury than she knew what to do with. She stood under the hot water for 20 minutes, letting it ease the aches in her body, and tried not to think about tomorrow. But that night, while Isla screamed through another sleepless stretch, and Lena paced the nursery with tears running down her own face, she couldn't help thinking about the way Victor's voice had sounded on the phone. Careful. Almost gentle. Like he was handling something fragile. Like he actually cared. Morning came too soon, gray and drizzling. Lena got herself and Isla dressed, then spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to make herself look less like a disaster. It didn't really work. The dark circles under her eyes and the exhaustion in her face were beyond makeup's ability to fix, but at least she looked clean and relatively put together. Victor arrived at 10, driving himself in a black sedan that was nice but not ostentatious. Lena watched from the window as he got out, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him. Dark jeans, a sweater, leather jacket. He looked younger like this. Almost normal, if you didn't notice the way he moved, the constant awareness in his eyes, the controlled power in every gesture. Sophia let him in, and Lena heard their voices in the foyer, low, professional, discussing something she couldn't make out. Then footsteps on the stairs, and Sophia appeared in the doorway of the nursery. Mr. DeLuca is here, she said, which Lena already knew. Should I send him up? Yes, thank you. Sophia disappeared, and a moment later Victor was standing in the doorway of the nursery, looking at Lena and the sleeping baby in her arms with an expression she couldn't read. Hi, Lena said, because someone had to break the silence. Hi. Victor stepped into the room, moving carefully, like he was entering sacred space. How is she? Loud, demanding, perfect. Lena looked down at Isla's face, memorizing the tiny details. She's been up most of the night, finally crashed about an hour ago. And you? When did you last sleep? Define sleep. Victor's mouth twitched, almost a smile. More than 2 hours consecutively. Then I don't remember. Lena gestured to the rocking chair. Sit, please, you're making me nervous standing there. He sat, and the chair looked smaller with him in it. They stayed like that for a few minutes, quiet, just existing in the same space. It should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. There was something peaceful about it, sharing this moment with someone who didn't need constant conversation. "I need to tell you something," Victor said finally. "About the situation with the Kozlovs." Lena's stomach tightened. "What happened?" "I reached out through intermediaries, made an offer to settle the debt for $200,000, a negotiated reduction, claiming hardship on your behalf." His voice was matter-of-fact, but there was tension underneath. "They refused, said they don't negotiate with anyone, and if they make an exception for you, it sets a precedent they can't afford." "So what now?" "Now we move to option 2. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I have people looking for Daniel. When we find him, we'll bring him in. He testifies that you had no knowledge of his activities, no involvement in how the debt was incurred. The Kozlovs accept that testimony and go after him instead of you. But will they accept it? If it comes from me with sufficient evidence and the right pressure applied? Yes." Something dark flickered across his face. "They know better than to ignore me when I make something a priority." Lena adjusted Isla in her arms, trying to process this. "And if we can't find Daniel?" "We will. He's not as clever as he thinks he is." Victor's voice hardened. "He's been moving around, but he leaves traces. It's just a matter of time." "How much time?" "Weeks, maybe less." He met her eyes. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. I know you'd rather this was over already. But I promised you honesty, and the honest truth is that this is going to take longer than we hoped. But we're safe here." It wasn't really a question. "You're safe here," Victor confirmed. "The Kozlovs don't know where you are, and they won't. Not unless someone talks, and no one will." Lena wanted to ask how he could be so sure, but she already knew the answer. People didn't cross Victor DeLuca, not if they wanted to keep breathing. "Okay," she said quietly. "Then we wait." Isla stirred, making small sounds that meant she'd be waking soon. Lena stood, moving to the crib to lay her down before she fully woke. Victor stayed in the chair, watching. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said, keeping her voice low. "Always." "Why do you care? Really? I know you said it's about children not paying for their parents' mistakes, and I know you lost a daughter. But this," she gestured around the nursery, at the house, at everything. "This is more than just helping someone in trouble. This is personal for you. Why?" Victor was quiet for so long that Lena thought he might not answer. Then he said, "When my daughter died, I was in a meeting. Some business deal that felt important at the time. My wife called and I ignored it because I was busy. She called again and I silenced the phone. By the time I got her message, by the time I got to the hospital, it was too late." His voice was steady, but Lena could hear the old grief underneath. "I spent 20 years telling myself it wouldn't have mattered, that even if I'd answered, even if I'd been there, the outcome would have been the same. But I don't know that. I'll never know. Victor, the night I saw you at the restaurant, trying to work through labor, alone and terrified, it was like seeing every choice I'd made that led to losing my daughter reflected back at me. And I thought, here's a chance to do something different, to be there when it matters, to not walk away when someone needs help." He looked at her directly, and his eyes were raw. "So that's why I care. Because I couldn't save my daughter, but maybe I can save yours." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know what to say to that." "You don't have to say anything." Isla woke then, her cry cutting through the moment. Lena picked her up, swaying automatically, but the baby was working herself up to a full meltdown. She tried nursing, but Isla turned away from the breast, screaming louder. "What's wrong?" Lena's voice came out panicked. "She was fine an hour ago. Why is she—" "Let me see." Victor stood, moving closer. "May I?" Lena hesitated, then passed Isla to him. He took the baby carefully, supporting her head, holding her against his chest with practiced ease. Then he started walking, a slow, swaying movement, and began speaking quietly in Italian, words Lena didn't understand but that sounded like a lullaby. Isla's cries started to quiet. Not immediately, but gradually, her body relaxing against Victor's chest as he paced the nursery. Within minutes, she was calm, hiccuping softly, her eyes starting to close. "How did you—" Lena stared at them. "I've been trying to calm her down for a week, and you just— Sometimes babies just need a different rhythm." Victor kept moving, kept swaying, his voice soft. My daughter liked this. The walking and the singing. It didn't always work, but when it did, he broke off, and Lena saw the grief flash across his face again. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but she didn't know how. So instead, she just watched as this dangerous man, this crime boss with blood on his hands and violence in his history, gently rocked her daughter to sleep while singing in a language she didn't speak. It was the most surreal and strangely beautiful thing she'd ever seen. When Isla was fully asleep, Victor carefully placed her back in the crib. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her with an expression that made Lena's chest ache. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome." He turned to face her. "I should go. Let you rest while she's sleeping." "You don't have to. I mean," Lena stumbled over the words. "You could stay for a while, if you want." Victor studied her face, and she wondered what he saw there. Exhaustion, definitely. Loneliness, probably. The desperate need for adult conversation that every new mother felt but few admitted to. "All right," he said finally, "I'll stay." They went downstairs to the kitchen, where Sophia was preparing lunch. She took one look at them and made herself scarce, which Lena appreciated. Victor made coffee, real coffee, expertly brewed, better than anything Lena had managed in the past week, and they sat at the kitchen island while rain pattered against the windows. "Tell me about your daughter," Lena said. "If you want to. What was her name?" "Elena." Victor wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "After my grandmother. She had dark hair like mine, and her mother's smile." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through it, then turned the screen toward Lena. The photo showed a younger Victor, maybe 35, with less silver in his hair and fewer lines around his eyes, holding a tiny baby wrapped in pink. His smile in the photo was unguarded, genuine, full of joy Lena had never seen in the man across from her now. "She's beautiful," Lena said softly. "She was." Victor put the phone away. "It was a long time ago. Different life." "Does it get easier, missing her?" "No, but you learn to carry it differently." He took a sip of coffee. "What about you? What's your story? How does a woman like you end up waiting tables and getting involved with someone like Daniel?" "A woman like me?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Smart, strong, capable. You're better than that life. Better than him." "You don't know me well enough to make that judgment." "Don't I?" Victor's gaze was steady. "I've seen how you handle yourself, how you negotiated terms for accepting my help, how you stood up to Patricia Reeves, how you're managing everything thrown at you without falling apart. That tells me plenty." Lena looked away, uncomfortable with the assessment. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 22. I was in college, studying art history, completely unprepared for real life. The insurance paid for the funeral and not much else. I dropped out, got a job waiting tables, told myself it was temporary. That was 8 years ago. And Daniel? Was charming, attentive, said all the right things." Lena laughed bitterly. "I thought he was different, thought he saw me as more than just a waitress. Turns out he saw me as convenient. Someone who wouldn't ask questions about where his money came from or where he went at night." "When did you realize you were pregnant?" 4 months in. By then he was already pulling away, staying out later, being secretive. I thought maybe a baby would bring us closer." She shook her head. "That was stupid. I knew it was stupid even as I was thinking it, but I wanted so badly to believe we could be a family." "That's not stupid," Victor said quietly. "That's human." They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, listening to the rain. Lena felt herself relaxing for the first time in weeks, the constant tension in her shoulders easing slightly. There was something surprisingly comfortable about Victor's presence. He didn't fill silence with empty chatter, didn't offer meaningless reassurances, didn't try to fix things that couldn't be fixed. He just existed beside her, solid and certain, and somehow that was enough. "Can I ask you something now?" Victor said eventually. "Fair's fair. What do you want? After this is over, when the debt is settled and the danger is gone, what does your life look like?" Lena considered the question. "I want Isla to be safe. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want—" She paused, trying to articulate something she'd barely admitted to herself. "I want to matter, to be more than invisible, to build something that's mine." What kind of something? I don't know yet, but something real. Something that means I didn't waste my 20s waiting tables and settling for less than I deserved. She looked at him directly. Does that sound naive? No, it sounds like ambition, and ambition is never naive. Victor set down his cup. When this is over, if you need help getting started, whatever you want to build, I can help with that. I don't want charity. Good. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering investment. You build something worthwhile, I provide capital and connections. You succeed, I get a return. That's business. Lena studied his face, trying to figure out if he was serious. You barely know me. I know enough. His expression didn't change. Think about it. No pressure, no timeline. Just know the offer's there. Before Lena could respond, her phone buzzed. She checked it and felt her blood run cold. It was a text from an unknown number, no words. Just a photo. A photo of her old apartment building. And a message below it. We know where you used to live. We'll know where you are now soon enough. 300,000 or the baby pays. Her hand started shaking so badly, she almost dropped the phone. Victor took it from her, looked at the screen, and his whole face went hard. Sophia! His voice cracked like a whip. Get Marcus. Now. Within seconds, the kitchen was full of people. Marcus, Sophia, 2 other security personnel Lena had never seen before. Victor was showing them the phone, issuing orders in that commanding voice that expected immediate obedience. Trace the number. Check all security footage from the last 24 hours. I want to know how they got this close. He looked at Marcus. Double the perimeter guards. No one gets within a mile of this property without us knowing. Victor? Lena's voice came out small, frightened. They threatened Isla. They said, I know what they said. He turned to her, and his expression softened slightly. Listen to me. They're fishing. They don't know where you are, so they're trying to scare you into making contact. It won't work. How can you be sure? Because if they knew where you were, they wouldn't waste time with threats. They'd just come. Victor's voice was steel-wrapped in certainty. You're safe here. Isla is safe. This changes nothing except the timeline. What timeline? I was trying to find Daniel quietly. Now I'm done being quiet. He looked at Marcus. Put the word out. Every contact, every informant, every person who owes me a favor. I want Daniel Reeves found within 48 hours. And I want the Kozlov brothers to know that Lena Moreau and her daughter are under my personal protection. Anyone who touches them answers to me. The room seemed to vibrate with tension. Marcus nodded and pulled out his phone, already making calls. The other security personnel dispersed to their assignments. Within minutes, it was just Lena and Victor and Sophia again, the kitchen feeling too large and too exposed. I should check on Isla, Lena said, needing to move, to do something. I'll come with you. Victor followed her upstairs and Lena didn't protest. Part of her was grateful for his presence, for the sense of safety he projected even when her world was falling apart. Isla was still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the danger circling her life. Lena stood by the crib, watching her daughter breathe, and felt rage building in her chest. They threatened my baby. Her voice shook. They sent me a picture of where I used to live, and they threatened my baby. I know. I want them gone. I want this over. I want... She turned to face Victor, and she could feel tears streaming down her face. I want them to hurt for threatening her, for making me afraid. I want them to know what it feels like to be powerless. Victor moved closer, not touching her, but present. They will. I promise you, they will. How can you promise that? Because I don't make promises I can't keep. His voice was quiet but absolute. The Kozlovs made this personal when they went after your daughter. And when things get personal with me, I don't stop until the problem is solved. Permanently. There was something in his tone that made Lena shiver, not with fear, but with a dark satisfaction she didn't quite want to examine. She should be horrified. She should be pushing back against the violence implied in his words. But instead, she felt relief. Because Victor DeLuca wasn't going to negotiate or reason or try to find a peaceful solution. He was going to end this. Whatever that took. What do you need from me? Lena asked. Stay here. Stay safe. Take care of Isla. Let me handle the rest. That's it? I just wait? That's it. Victor's expression softened. I know it feels like doing nothing, but keeping yourself and your daughter safe while I work is the most important thing you can do right now. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to demand a more active role, but she looked at Isla sleeping in the crib and knew he was right. Her job wasn't to fight. Her job was to protect her daughter. Everything else was just details. Okay, she said finally. I'll wait. But Victor, when you find Daniel, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I want to see him. I want to look him in the eye and hear him explain why he thought it was acceptable to leave me alone and pregnant to face this. Done. Victor didn't hesitate. When we bring him in, you'll get your chance. He left shortly after, and the house fell into tense silence. Lena tried to rest while Isla slept, but every sound made her jump. Every shadow felt like a threat. The security cameras that had seemed like overkill now felt essential. The guards patrolling the perimeter went from intrusive to reassuring. She'd been living in a bubble of false safety, she realized, pretending the danger wasn't real because it felt too overwhelming to face. But that text had shattered the illusion. The Kozlovs were out there, actively looking for her, and they'd made clear what they intended to do when they found her. Lena pulled out her phone and looked at the photo again. Her old apartment building, ordinary and sad in the gray light. She thought about the life she'd been living there, small and scared and invisible. That person felt like a stranger now. Someone from another lifetime. She wasn't that person anymore. Couldn't be. Even if she wanted to. Because that person would have crumbled under this kind of pressure. That person would have given up. But Lena Moreau, new mother, survivor, woman, under Victor DeLuca's protection. She was made of stronger stuff than she'd known. And she was done being afraid. The Kozlovs wanted $300,000 or her baby's life. They could have neither. Because Victor had promised to end this, and Lena believed him. Not because she was naive, but because she'd seen the look in his eyes when he'd held Isla. She'd heard the steel in his voice when he'd issued orders. She'd felt the absolute certainty in his presence. He would protect them, and anyone stupid enough to threaten her daughter would learn exactly what that protection cost. Lena looked down at Isla, still sleeping peacefully, and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, whoever got hurt in the process of ending this nightmare, she wouldn't apologize for it. Wouldn't feel guilty for accepting help from a dangerous man or for the violence that help might require. Because her daughter's life was worth more than her conscience, more than her principles, more than anything. And if that made her ruthless, so be it. She'd become whatever she needed to be to keep Isla safe. 36 hours after the text, Victor called. We found him, he said without preamble. Atlantic City, just like I thought. Working security at a casino under the name Marcus Webb. Lena was sitting in the nursery, Isla asleep against her shoulder, and the words hit her like electricity. When? My people have him now. They're bringing him back tonight. Victor's voice was carefully neutral. You said you wanted to see him. That offer still stands. Yes. The word came out harder than she'd intended. I want to see him. I'll arrange it. Tomorrow afternoon, neutral location. You, me, Daniel. No one else unless you want Sophia there. Just us is fine. Lena adjusted Isla, feeling her daughter's warm breath against her neck. What happens to him after? That depends on the conversation, Victor paused, and on what you want to happen. I don't know what I want yet. Fair enough. Figure it out tonight. I'll pick you up at 2 tomorrow. He hung up, and Lena sat there holding Isla, trying to process the fact that in less than 24 hours she'd be face to face with Daniel for the first time since he'd abandoned her. 6 months of silence, 6 months of struggling alone, 6 months of fear and anger and hurt. All of it was about to come crashing together in one room. She should be nervous, should be planning what to say, rehearsing confrontations in her head. But instead she just felt cold, detached, like she was watching this happen to someone else. That night, Isla was fussy again, fighting sleep with the determination of someone twice her size. Lena walked her around the nursery, swaying and shushing, but her mind was elsewhere. On Daniel, on what she'd say to him, on whether seeing him would bring back the feelings she'd thought were dead, or just confirm what she already knew, that he was a coward who'd never deserved her in the first place. Your father's coming back, Lena whispered to Isla around 3 in the morning, when the baby had finally started to settle. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what I want from him anymore. But you deserve to know the truth about who he is, what he did, and then you can decide for yourself what kind of relationship you want with him, if any. Isla made a small sound, her eyes closing, and Lena felt that fierce protectiveness surge through her again. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever Daniel said or didn't say, she would make sure Isla knew she was loved, that she was wanted, that her mother had fought for her when her father had run. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lena fed Isla, changed her, tried to focus on the mundane tasks of motherhood while her mind spun with possibilities. Sophia helped without asking questions, which Lena appreciated. There was nothing to say anyway. No amount of talking would make tomorrow's confrontation easier. At exactly 2 o'clock, Victor arrived. He was back in the suit, all business, but his eyes softened when he saw Lena standing in the foyer with Isla in her arms. "You ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." Sophia took Isla gently, promising to call if there were any problems. Lena kissed her daughter's forehead and forced herself to walk away, to get in Victor's car, to let him drive her to whatever warehouse or office or neutral space he'd chosen for this meeting. They drove in silence through the city. Lena watched the buildings pass, the people on the sidewalks living their normal lives, and felt like she was moving through a different world entirely. One where ex-boyfriends got dragged back from hiding by crime bosses, where $300,000 debts hung over your head, where the only thing standing between you and danger was a man most people crossed the street to avoid. "He's scared," Victor said eventually. "My people didn't hurt him, but he knows what position he's in, knows what he's facing." "Good." Lena's voice was flat. "He should be scared. What are you hoping to get from this conversation?" "Answers. An explanation. Something that makes sense of why he thought abandoning me was acceptable." She turned to look at Victor. "And I want him to see Isla. I want him to know exactly what he walked away from." Victor nodded, but didn't respond. They pulled into an underground parking garage, took an elevator up to the 3rd floor of what looked like an office building. The space they entered was sparse: conference table, a few chairs, windows overlooking the city. And sitting at the table, looking smaller and more pathetic than Lena remembered, was Daniel. He stood when she entered, and she saw the exact moment he registered her presence. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. His hands were shaking. "Lena." Her name came out rough, desperate. "I'm so sorry. Sit down." Victor's voice cut through the apology like a knife. "You'll speak when she asks you a question. Otherwise, you'll stay quiet." Daniel sat. Lena took the chair across from him, and Victor positioned himself by the door, present but giving them space. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lena said, "I had a girl. Isla. She's 3 weeks old." Daniel's face crumpled. "Lena, I said you speak when I ask a question." Her voice was ice. "I went into labor at work. Alone. A stranger had to drive me to the hospital because you weren't there. I gave birth without anyone holding my hand, without anyone telling me it would be okay. Do you understand that? Do you understand what you did to me?" "I'm sorry." Tears were running down his face now. "I'm so sorry. I was scared. I didn't know how to—" "How much did you really owe them?" Lena interrupted. "The truth. All of it." Daniel swallowed hard. 300,000. I was gambling, trying to make back the money I'd already lost, and it just kept getting worse. The Kozlovs gave me a deadline. When I couldn't pay, they said they'd start taking it out on people around me, so I ran." "You ran?" Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You ran and left me to deal with your mess. Did you know I was pregnant when you left?" "I suspected. You'd been sick in the mornings, and I saw the pregnancy test box in the trash." He couldn't meet her eyes. "But I told myself maybe it was negative. Maybe I was wrong. It was easier that way." "Easier." The word tasted like poison. "It was easier to abandon me than to face what you'd done." "Yes." The admission came out broken. "I'm a coward, Lena. I always have been. You deserve better than me. You deserved—" "Don't tell me what I deserved. You don't get to do that." Lena leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. Mr. DeLuca is going to handle your debt with the Kozlovs. You're going to give testimony that I had nothing to do with how you incurred it, that I was completely uninvolved.
And then you're going to disappear from my life. But the baby, Isla. Lena's voice hardened. Her name is Isla. And yes, she's yours biologically, but you don't get to be her father. Not now. Maybe not ever. Please. Daniel reached across the table, but Lena pulled back. Please, let me try. Let me be there for her. I'll do better. I'll change. You'll what? Suddenly become someone reliable? Someone brave? Someone who doesn't run when things get hard? Lena shook her head. I don't believe you, and even if I did, I wouldn't risk it. Isla deserves stability. She deserves people in her life who won't abandon her the moment things get difficult. So that's it? You're just cutting me out completely? No? Lena sat back, choosing her words carefully. I'm giving Isla the option of knowing you someday, when she's old enough to understand. I'm not going to lie to her about who her father is or what happened, but I'm also not going to force a relationship that you clearly don't want badly enough to fight for. I do want it. I want to know her. If you wanted it, you would have stayed. The words came out quiet but devastating. If you wanted to be a father, you would have been there when she was born. You would have faced the consequences of your choices instead of running. But you didn't. So now you get to live with what that means. Daniel was openly sobbing now, and part of Lena felt satisfaction at his pain, but mostly she just felt tired. This man, this weak, selfish man, had taken up so much space in her life, had made her doubt herself, had made her small and scared and dependent. She'd wasted months loving someone who'd never deserved it. But that was over now. I need you to sign something, Victor said, speaking for the first time since they'd sat down. He pulled papers from a briefcase Lena hadn't noticed. Legal documentation that you waive all parental rights to the child. That you won't seek custody or visitation without the mother's explicit consent. That you acknowledge full responsibility for the debt and absolve Lena of any connection to it. And if I don't sign? Daniel's voice was small. Then I hand you over to the Kozlovs and let them collect their debt however they see fit. Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice, and they all knew it. Daniel took the pen with shaking hands and signed every page, his signature barely legible through his tears. When he was done, Victor collected the papers and tucked them back into the briefcase. You're free to go, Victor said, but if you contact Lena or attempt to find her, if you make any claim on the child, if you do anything other than disappear quietly, the agreement becomes void and you deal with me directly. Understand? Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. He stood, looked at Lena one more time, and said, I really am sorry. For everything. Lena didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Sorry didn't undo the past 6 months. Sorry didn't change the fact that he'd abandoned her when she needed him most. Sorry was just a word. And words were cheap. Daniel left, and then it was just Lena and Victor in the conference room. She felt hollow. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long that now that it was gone, she didn't know how to stand without its weight. You okay? Victor asked quietly. I don't know. Lena stared at the door Daniel had just walked through. I thought seeing him would feel different, like closure or relief or something, but it just feels empty. That's normal. Sometimes the things we build up in our heads end up being smaller in reality. He looked pathetic. Lena turned to face Victor. All this time I've been so angry at him, hating him for what he did. But looking at him now, I just feel sorry for him. He's going to spend the rest of his life knowing he walked away from his daughter. That's a worse punishment than anything we could do to him. Victor moved to sit in the chair Daniel had vacated. What he did to you, leaving you alone and pregnant, there's no excuse for that. But you're right that he'll carry it. Some choices you can't take back. What happens now with the Kozlovs? I'll present them with Daniel's testimony and the documentation. Make it clear that you were an innocent party, that pursuing you would be pursuing someone under my protection, and that I consider this matter closed. Victor's expression was unreadable. They'll accept it. They won't like it, but they'll accept it. And Daniel? He disappears. New city, new name if he's smart. The debt is settled through other means. I'll handle the details. Victor paused. He won't bother you again. Lena nodded slowly, trying to process that it was almost over. The threat that had hung over her for months was dissolving. She would be safe. Isla would be safe. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. I know I keep saying that, but I don't know how else to. You don't have to thank me. Victor's voice was gentle. I told you from the beginning, children don't pay for their parents' mistakes. I meant that. They sat in silence for a while, the afternoon light slanting through the windows. Lena thought about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago, scared, alone, invisible. That woman felt like someone from another life, someone who'd accepted less than she deserved because she didn't know she could ask for more. Can I tell you something? Lena said eventually. Always. When you first offered to help me, I was terrified. Not just of the situation, but of you. Everything I'd heard about you, everything people said, I thought accepting your help meant becoming someone I didn't want to be, someone compromised. She looked at him directly. But you've been nothing but honest with me. You've never asked for anything I wasn't willing to give. You've protected Isla like she was your own. And I'm realizing that everything people say about you is probably true. The violence, the power, all of it. But it's not the whole truth. What's the whole truth? Victor asked carefully. That you're more complicated than your reputation. That you have principles, even if they're not conventional ones. That you care about people even when it would be easier not to. Lena felt her throat tighten. That losing your daughter broke something in you, but you haven't let it make you completely hard. You're still capable of kindness, of compassion. Victor was quiet for a long moment. You see me more clearly than most people do. I'm not sure that's a good thing. Why not? Because once you see someone clearly, you can't unsee them. You can't go back to whatever simpler version you had in your head. His eyes met hers. And sometimes the truth is more complicated than people want to deal with. I'm not afraid of complicated. Lena surprised herself with the words, but they were true. Not anymore. They drove back to the house in silence, but it was different from the silence on the way there. Comfortable. Settled. Like something had shifted between them in that conference room, some understanding reached that didn't need to be spoken aloud. When they arrived, Sophia met them at the door with Isla in her arms. She's been perfect, Sophia said, passing the baby to Lena. Fed, changed, slept like an angel. Lena held Isla close, breathing in that new baby smell, feeling the solid weight of her daughter in her arms. This was real. This mattered. Everything else, Daniel, the debt, the danger, was just background noise to the simple fact of Isla's existence. I should go, Victor said, but he didn't move toward the door. You could stay, Lena heard herself say. For dinner. Sophia made enough for an army, and She paused, trying to find the right words. I'd like the company. If you don't have somewhere else to be. Something shifted in Victor's expression. I don't have somewhere else to be. So he stayed. They ate dinner in the kitchen while Isla dozed in her bassinet, and they talked about nothing important, books, movies, the absurdity of trying to drink coffee one-handed while holding a baby. Normal conversation, the kind Lena hadn't realized she'd been craving. At some point, Isla woke up and started fussing. Victor picked her up without asking, settling her against his chest with that same practiced ease he'd shown before. He walked around the kitchen, swaying gently, and started humming that Italian lullaby again. Lena watched them and felt something crack open in her chest. This dangerous man, this crime boss everyone feared, was cradling her daughter like she was made of glass. The contrast was dizzying. Victor's scarred hands against Ila's perfect skin, his dark past against her innocent future. But somehow it worked. Somehow it made sense. Can I ask you something? Lena said quietly. Victor looked up from Isla's sleeping face. Of course. What do you want? From this. She gestured between them. I know you said you're helping because of your daughter, because you couldn't save her. But what do you get out of this? Victor was quiet for so long that Lena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, Peace. For a little while. The chance to be someone other than what the world expects me to be. He looked down at Isla. With you and her, I am not Victor DeLuca, the crime boss. I'm just Victor. Someone who makes coffee and knows how to calm crying babies and maybe deserves something good in his life. The words hit Lena harder than she'd expected. You do deserve something good. That's debatable. No. Lena stood, moving closer to him. You've done terrible things.
I'm not naive enough to think otherwise. But you've also done good things. You've protected people who needed protecting. You've shown me more kindness than anyone in my life. That counts for something. Victor met her eyes, and Lena saw something vulnerable there, something that made her want to reach out, to close the distance between them, to... Isla chose that moment to wake up fully, her cry cutting through the tension. Victor handed her to Lena with a rueful smile. Impeccable timing. She's good at that. Lena adjusted Isla, checking to see if she needed changing. I should probably get her ready for bed. She's been up too long. I should go anyway. Let you rest. But Victor didn't move toward the door. Victor? Lena touched his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath his sleeve. Thank you for today, for handling Daniel, for being here. You're welcome. His voice was rough. I'll call you tomorrow. Let you know how things go with the Kozlovs. Okay. He left, and Lena was alone with Isla. She went through the bedtime routine, bath, clean diaper, nursing, on autopilot, her mind replaying the day. Daniel's tears. The signed papers. Victor's admission that being with her and Isla gave him peace. That last part kept circling back, demanding attention. Victor DeLuca found peace with her. This man who could have anything, do anything, found something valuable in her broken life. The thought was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure, because Lena was beginning to realize that what she felt for Victor wasn't just gratitude or dependency or even attraction, though all of those were present. It was something deeper, something that terrified her because she'd been wrong about feelings before, had trusted the wrong person, and paid for it. But Victor wasn't Daniel. He'd proven that over and over. He was honest about who he was, what he did, what he could offer. There was no pretense, no lies, no promises he couldn't keep. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. Lena put Isla down in the crib and stood there watching her sleep, thinking about futures she'd never imagined. Futures where she wasn't alone, where Isla had someone who cared about her, protected her, saw her as precious, where Lena herself mattered to someone who had every reason to walk away but chose to stay. It was too soon to call it anything, too soon to put words to the feeling building in her chest, but it was there, undeniable and growing stronger every day. She was falling for Victor DeLuca. The realization should have scared her more than it did. 2 days later, Victor called with news. It's done, he said. I met with the Kozlovs, showed them the documentation, made it clear you were uninvolved. They're not happy about it, but they've agreed to drop any claim against you. Lena sat down heavily on the couch, Isla sleeping in her arms. Just like that? Just like that? Victor's voice was carefully neutral. You're free, Lena. You and Isla both. The debt is settled, the danger is over. She should feel relief, should feel joy, but instead she felt something like loss. What does that mean for us, for the arrangement? It means you can leave whenever you're ready. I'll help you set up somewhere safe, somewhere new if you want, or you can stay in the city. The Kozlovs won't bother you now that we have an agreement. A pause. The choice is yours. The choice is yours. Words that should have felt like freedom, but instead felt like a door closing. And if I don't want to leave, then, Lena heard herself ask, what if I want to stay here, keep the arrangement as is? Silence on the other end of the line. Then Victor said carefully, why would you want that? Because I feel safe here. Because Isla is thriving. Because, Lena took a breath, because I'm not ready to go back to being alone. More silence. Lena could hear her heart beating in her ears, could feel Isla's warm weight against her chest, could sense the enormous risk she was taking. Lena. Victor's voice was rough. You need to understand what you're saying. If you stay, if we continue this arrangement, people will make assumptions. About us. About what our relationship is. Let them assume. It's not that simple. Being connected to me, even perceived connection, comes with consequences. Danger, complications you can't imagine. I think I can imagine them just fine. Lena shifted Isla to her other arm. You've been honest about who you are from the beginning. I know what your world looks like, and I'm telling you that I want to stay anyway. Why? The word came out almost desperate. Why would you choose this when you could walk away?
Start fresh somewhere safe.
Because safe isn't the same as happy. Because starting fresh somewhere else means being alone again. And I'm tired of being alone.
Lena's voice strengthened.
Because when I think about my future, about Isla's future, you're in it. And that should terrify me, but it doesn't. It feels right. Victor was quiet for so long that Lena thought he'd hung up. Then he said, I'm coming over. We need to have this conversation in person. He arrived 30 minutes later and Lena met him in the foyer with Isla still sleeping against her shoulder. Victor looked at them both with an expression she couldn't read, something between hope and fear and desperate longing. Let me put her down, Lena said. Then we can talk. She settled Isla in the crib, checking the monitor twice to make sure it was working, then joined Victor in the living room. He was standing by the window, looking out at the grounds, his shoulders tense. I'm not good at this, he said without turning around. At relationships. At being what someone needs. My marriage failed because I couldn't separate my work from my personal life. Because I put business first and my family paid the price. I'm not asking you to be perfect. Lena moved closer. I'm asking you to be honest, to be present when you can, to not make promises you can't keep. And if I can't be what you need, what Isla needs, then we figure it out, together. Lena touched his shoulder, feeling him tense under her hand. But you don't get to make that decision for me. You don't get to push me away because you're scared. Victor turned to face her, and his eyes were raw. I'm terrified. Of failing you. Of failing her. Of becoming someone you look at with fear instead of... He broke off. Instead of what? Instead of the way you're looking at me right now. His voice was barely above a whisper. Like I'm worth something. Like I matter. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. You do matter. To me. To Isla. Don't you see that? I see that you're the best thing to walk into my life in 20 years and I'm going to destroy it somehow. That's what I do. I destroy good things. No. Lena stepped closer, closing the distance between them. You protect good things. You've proven that. You protected me when I had no one else. You protected Isla before you even knew her. You keep your promises, Victor. That's more than most people can say. He reached up, cupping her face with one scarred hand. If we do this, if we try this, there's no going back. People will know you're mine. That comes with protection, but it also comes with risk. I understand. And when Isla gets older, when she understands what I do, what I am, she might hate you for choosing this, for choosing me. Or she might understand that you gave us safety when we had none, that you showed up when her biological father ran, that you cared about her before you had any obligation to. Lena covered his hand with hers. I'm willing to take that risk. Victor searched her face, looking for doubt or hesitation. Lena made sure he found none. I'm falling for you, she said quietly. I've been trying not to. Telling myself it's just gratitude or dependency or some kind of trauma bond. But it's not. It's real. And I think you feel it too. I do. The admission seemed to cost him. I have from the beginning, from that first night when you were so scared but so brave, when you held your ground even when everything was falling apart. His thumb brushed her cheek. You're remarkable, Lena Moreau, and you deserve so much better than me. Let me decide what I deserve. She rose on her toes, bringing her face closer to his. Say yes, Victor. Say we can try this. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then he closed the remaining distance and kissed her. It was gentle at first, careful, like he was afraid she might break. But Lena leaned into it, into him, and the kiss deepened. It tasted like possibility and danger and new beginnings all tangled together. It tasted like something she'd been missing without knowing it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. Yes, he said quietly. We can try this. The kiss changed everything and nothing simultaneously. Victor didn't move into the house. That would have been too fast, too presumptuous. But he started coming by more often. Morning coffee before Isla woke up. Dinner a few nights a week. Quick visits in the afternoon when he had breaks between meetings. They were careful around each other at first, testing the boundaries of this new dynamic. Lena would catch Victor watching her while she fed Isla, his expression unguarded in those moments. And sometimes when Isla was crying and nothing Lena did seem to help, Victor would take her and walk her around the nursery humming that Italian lullaby until the baby settled. Those moments felt more intimate than the kissing, somehow. More real. 3 weeks after their conversation, Lena woke to the sound of raised voices downstairs. Her heart jumped into her throat, old instincts from the days of danger. But then she recognized Victor's voice. Angry, controlled, but definitely Victor. She grabbed her robe and checked on Isla, who was still sleeping peacefully, then headed downstairs. Victor was in the foyer with Marcus, both men standing too close, tension crackling between them. "Cannot make unilateral decisions about her safety without consulting me," Victor was saying, his voice low and dangerous. "With respect, sir, you're not thinking clearly about this situation." Marcus stood his ground, which took courage. "Your involvement with Ms. Moreau has created complications. People are talking, making assumptions that put her at risk." "What people?" Lena asked from the stairs, and both men turned to look at her. "What's going on?" Victor's expression softened when he saw her, but Marcus just looked uncomfortable. "There's been chatter," Marcus said carefully, "about your relationship with Mr. DeLuca. Some of his business associates have questions about the nature of your arrangement." "Questions?" Lena came down the rest of the stairs, tying her robe tighter. "What kind of questions?" "Whether you're a weakness," Victor said bluntly. "Whether caring about you makes me vulnerable. Whether they can use you to get to me." The words should have scared her, should have made her reconsider everything, but Lena just felt angry. "So what do they want? For you to end this? To send me away?" "Some of them, yes." Victor moved toward her, and Marcus wisely stepped back. "They think I'm being reckless, that I should stick to business and keep my personal life separate. And what do you think?" "I think they can go to hell." Victor's voice was steel. "I also think they have a point about the risk. Not enough to change anything, but enough that we need to be smarter about how we handle this." Marcus cleared his throat. "I've recommended increasing security. Additional guards, restricted access to the property, changing some of your regular patterns. Standard protocols when there's a potential vulnerability." "I'm not a vulnerability," Lena said sharply. "I'm a person, and I'm tired of being treated like a problem that needs solving." "That's not what he meant," Victor started, but Lena cut him off. "Isn't it? Ever since I met you, people have been making decisions about my life without asking me. Daniel did it. You did it at the beginning, though at least you were honest about it. And now Marcus is doing it." She looked at both men. "I understand that your world is dangerous. I understand that being with you comes with risks. But I need to be part of these conversations. I need to have a say in how my own life is managed." Silence fell over the foyer. Marcus looked at Victor, clearly waiting for direction. Victor looked at Lena with something that might have been admiration. "You're right," Victor said finally. "We should have included you in this discussion. I apologize." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Moreau, I didn't mean to—" "I know." Lena's voice softened slightly. "You're doing your job, protecting people. I appreciate that. But I'm not just someone who needs protecting. I'm someone who gets to decide what risks are worth taking." "Fair enough." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then let me present the situation fully, and you can decide. There are 3 factions in Mr. DeLuca's organization who are uncomfortable with his personal involvement with you. 2 of them are just concerned about operational security. They'll settle down once they see the enhanced protocols. The 3rd faction is more problematic. They're led by a man named Anton Volkov, and they see your presence as a sign that Mr. DeLuca is getting soft, losing focus." "Let me guess," Lena said. "Volkov wants to test that theory." "We don't know for certain, but he's been asking questions, trying to find out where you're staying, what your routines are, which suggests he's considering making a move." Lena felt cold, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of move?" "Could be anything from intimidation to actual harm." Marcus's voice was clinical, professional. "Which is why we need to tighten security and potentially relocate you temporarily." "No." The word came out harder than Lena intended. "I'm not running again. I'm not letting some man I've never met dictate where I live or how I protect my daughter." "Lena," Victor started, but she turned to him. "You said people would make assumptions, that there would be risks. I accepted that. But I didn't accept it just to hide in different locations every time someone decides I'm a problem.
She straightened her shoulders. So here's what's going to happen. You do whatever security measures you think are necessary. But I stay here, in this house, living my life. And if this Volkov person wants to test whether you're getting soft, he can try.
But he'll find out that protecting the people you care about doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous. Victor stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Marcus. You heard her. Increase security, but she stays. And send a message to Volkov. Tell him that Lena Moreau and her daughter are under my personal protection, and anyone who threatens them will answer to me directly. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better. Yes, sir. I'll make the arrangements. After he left, Victor and Lena stood in the foyer, the early morning light making patterns on the floor. Upstairs, Isla started crying, her morning feeding time. I need to get her, Lena said, but she didn't move immediately. Are we okay? You and me? We're okay. Victor touched her face gently. More than okay. You're remarkable, you know that? You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. He kissed her forehead. Go take care of Isla. I'll make coffee. The next few weeks were tense. Security was increased to the point where Lena couldn't walk outside without 3 guards materializing from nowhere. Every car that drove past the property was logged. Every delivery was inspected. It was suffocating and necessary in equal measure. But Victor was right. The 2 reasonable factions settled down once they saw the enhanced protocols. And Volkov, apparently receiving the message loud and clear, went quiet. Too quiet, according to Marcus, who kept insisting that silence was more dangerous than open confrontation. Lena tried to focus on Isla, on building some kind of normal life within the abnormal circumstances. She started taking online classes, business management, entrepreneurship, things that would help her build the future she'd talked about with Victor. She hired a lawyer to look into opening an LLC. She sketched out plans for a business that would help other women in situations like hers. Single mothers, women escaping bad relationships, people who needed a second chance. Victor supported all of it, offering advice and connections, but never pushing. It was his idea to set up a foundation that would fund her business and others like it, using his resources to create something good from all the darkness in his past. You don't have to do this, Lena told him one evening while they sat in the living room, Isla asleep in her bassinet between them. Use your money to help me build something. That's not your responsibility. I want to. Victor was reading through business proposals, his glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look almost scholarly. Besides, it's good business. Helping women build stable lives, create opportunities, that strengthens communities. Strong communities mean better outcomes for everyone. You're really going to justify this as good business? He looked up from the papers, a small smile playing at his lips. Would you prefer I say it's because I'm falling in love with you and want to support your dreams? Lena's breath caught. They hadn't used that word yet. Love. It had been hovering between them for weeks, obvious but unspoken. Are you? She asked quietly. Falling in love with me? Victor set down the papers, removed his glasses, and looked at her directly. I think I fell in love with you that first night, when you were terrified and in pain but still trying to be brave, still trying to maintain control even when everything was falling apart. He leaned forward. Every day since has just confirmed what I already knew. You're extraordinary, Lena, and yes, I love you. Tears pricked Lena's eyes. I love you too. I've been trying not to because it seemed crazy, falling for you this fast in these circumstances. But I do. I love you. Victor crossed the space between them, careful not to disturb Isla, and kissed her. It was different from their first kiss, deeper, more certain, carrying the weight of everything they'd been through together. When they broke apart, Isla chose that moment to wake up and start fussing. They both laughed, the tension breaking into something lighter. Impeccable timing, Victor said, echoing his words from weeks ago. She's very good at that. Lena picked up Isla, settling her for a feeding. Do you ever think about having more? Kids, I mean. The question hung in the air. Victor was quiet for a moment, watching Isla nurse. I didn't, he said finally. After Elena died, after my marriage fell apart, I told myself that part of my life was over, that I'd had my chance and lost it. He met Lena's eyes. But being with you and Isla, it's made me reconsider a lot of things I thought were settled.
So that's a maybe? That's a let's see where this goes and talk about it when Isla is sleeping through the night and we've both had more than 4 hours of consecutive sleep. His smile was gentle. One life-changing decision at a time. Fair enough? That night, after Isla was down and Lena was getting ready for bed, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Moreau. The voice was male, accented, Russian, she thought. We haven't been introduced. My name is Anton Volkov. Lena's blood ran cold. She glanced at the baby monitor, making sure Isla was still sleeping, then stepped into the hallway. What do you want? Direct. I appreciate that. Volkov sounded amused. I wanted to speak with you personally, woman to woman, so to speak, about your relationship with Victor.
We have nothing to discuss. I disagree. You see, I've been watching you, learning about you, and I find myself curious about what kind of woman could make Victor DeLuca lose his focus so completely. I haven't made him lose anything. Lena kept her voice steady even as her heart raced. And calling me is a mistake. Victor will what? Threaten me? He's already done that. Volkov's voice hardened. But threats only work when the person making them has nothing to lose. And you, Miss Moreau, have given him something to lose. Get to the point. The point is simple. You're a liability. To Victor, to his organization, to the stability we've all worked to build. And liabilities need to be eliminated. The words hit like ice water. Lena moved to the window, checking the grounds below. Security guards were visible, patrolling in pairs. If you're trying to scare me, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm giving you information so you can make an informed choice. Volkov's voice was almost pleasant. You can leave. Take your daughter and disappear. Victor will be angry, but he'll recover. His focus will return, and you'll be safe. Or you stay, and I make sure Victor understands the consequences of letting personal feelings interfere with business. Those consequences will likely involve you and your daughter. A pause. I'm a reasonable man, Ms. Moreau. I'm giving you 48 hours to decide. After that, the choice is made for you. The line went dead. Lena stood there shaking, the phone clutched in her hand. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Isla and disappear, to protect her daughter at any cost. But running meant giving up everything she'd built here. It meant abandoning Victor, proving Volkov right that she was a weakness. And it meant teaching Isla that when dangerous men made threats, you surrendered. She called Victor. He answered on the first ring. Volkov just called me, she said without preamble. Gave me 48 hours to leave or face consequences. Silence. Then, are you safe right now? Is Isla safe? We're fine. Security is everywhere. Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm on my way. His voice was controlled fury. And Lena? Don't even think about leaving. We're ending this tonight. Victor, tonight. I promise you. He hung up, and Lena went to the nursery, checking on Isla one more time. Her daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the threat circling their lives. Lena sat in the rocking chair, watching her breathe, and felt something harden in her chest. She'd spent too much of her life being afraid, being small, letting dangerous men dictate her choices. That ended now. When Victor arrived 30 minutes later, he had Marcus and 4 other men with him. They gathered in the living room, and the air crackled with tension. Tell me exactly what he said, Victor commanded. Lena repeated the conversation word for word. Victor's expression got darker with each sentence. He's forcing a confrontation, Marcus said, making this about whether you'll choose business or personal loyalty. It's not a choice. Victor's voice was ice. Volkov has been pushing boundaries for months, testing how far he can go. This ends tonight. What are you going to do? Lena asked. Victor looked at her, and she saw the crime boss everyone feared. I'm going to remind him why people don't cross me. And I'm going to make sure everyone in the organization understands that threatening you or Isla means declaring war on me personally. That could split your organization. Then it splits. Victor moved to her, taking her hands. I told you from the beginning, children don't pay for their parents' mistakes. Well, you and Isla aren't paying for mine either. Not for the life I've built. Not for the enemies I've made. Volkov wants to test whether loving you makes me weak. He's about to find out it makes me ruthless. Marcus cleared his throat. Sir, if you're planning what I think you're planning, then you know better than to try to talk me out of it. Victor's voice was final. Make the calls. I want every faction leader at the warehouse in 2 hours, and I want Volkov to know he either shows up or he's declared an enemy of the organization. The men dispersed to make arrangements, leaving Lena and Victor alone. She should tell him to be careful, to not do anything he'd regret. But she'd seen the look in his eyes. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about power and loyalty and the rules that governed his world. "What's going to happen?" she asked quietly. "I'm going to give them a choice. Stand with me, accept that you and Isla are part of my life, and therefore under organizational protection, or stand against me and face the consequences." Victor cupped her face. "This might get ugly. Some people might choose to walk away, some might choose to fight. But it ends tonight, one way or another. I'm scared. I know. But you don't have to be. This is my world, my fight. You just stay here with Isla and trust that I'll handle it." "Will you?" Lena held his gaze. "Handle it, I mean, without becoming someone you'll regret being?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "I've done terrible things in my life, Lena. Things I'll answer for someday. But everything I do tonight, I do for you and Isla. To protect the future I want with you. I won't regret that." He kissed her once, hard and desperate, then left with his men. Lena stood at the window, watching the cars disappear down the drive, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The hours crawled by. Sophia stayed with her, both women pretending to focus on normal tasks while tension wound tighter. Lena fed Isla, changed her, rocked her, all on autopilot. Her mind was with Victor, at whatever warehouse he'd summoned his organization to, facing down a man who'd threatened her daughter. At midnight, her phone rang. "Victor." "It's done," he said, and his voice was rough with exhaustion. "What happened?" "Volkov is gone. Not dead. Exiled. Stripped of his position and assets. Sent out of the city with a warning never to return." Victor took a breath. "Most of the faction leaders stood with me. 3 chose to leave the organization rather than accept my relationship with you. That's their right. The rest understand that you and Isla are protected. Anyone who threatens you threatens me." Lena felt tears running down her face. "Did anyone get hurt?" "Minor injuries, nothing serious. Volkov tried to make a stand, but he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered." A pause. "I need you to know, I gave him a choice. Leave peacefully or leave in pieces. He chose peace. I'm trying, Lena, to be better than my worst instincts." "I know you are," Lena's voice cracked. "Come home. Please, just come home. I'm already on my way." When Victor arrived an hour later, he looked exhausted. There was blood on his knuckles, not much, but some, and his suit jacket was torn. Lena met him at the door and just held him, feeling the tension slowly drain from his body. "It's over," he said against her hair. "Really over this time. The Kozlovs, Volkov, all of it. You're safe. Isla's safe." "We're all safe." Lena pulled back to look at him. "Including you." They went upstairs together, checked on Isla one more time, then collapsed into bed. Victor pulled Lena against him, and she felt him finally relax, the adrenaline and fear draining away. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know I said it earlier, but I need you to hear it again. I love you, you and Isla both. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "A reason to be better, a future worth protecting." He kissed her temple. "I'm not going to be perfect at this. I'm going to make mistakes, bring home the wrong kind of stress, struggle to separate my work from my personal life. But I'm going to try. Every day I'm going to try to be worthy of what you've given me." "You already are," Lena whispered. "You showed up when no one else did. You protected me when I couldn't protect myself. You loved my daughter before you had any reason to. That's more than worthy. That's extraordinary." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in months, Lena slept through the night without nightmares. 6 months later, Lena stood in the renovated brownstone that would house her new business, Second Chances, a resource center for single mothers and women escaping difficult situations. The space was beautiful, full of light and possibility, with offices for counseling, a childcare area, meeting rooms for classes and workshops. Victor had insisted on funding the entire operation,
but he'd done it through the foundation they'd set up together, making Lena a full partner in every decision.
She'd hired staff, developed programs, created partnerships with other organizations. In 2 weeks, they'd opened their doors to their first clients. "It's perfect," Sophia said, walking through the space with Ela on her hip. The baby was 6 months old now, sitting up on her own, babbling constantly, reaching for everything. "You should be proud." "I am." Lena looked around at what she'd built. Terrified but proud. That's parenthood in general. Sophia bounced Isla, making her giggle. And business ownership, and probably life. Victor arrived as they were finishing the tour, carrying coffee and pastries from the Italian bakery down the street. He'd been in meetings all morning, but had promised to make the final walkthrough before the opening. "What do you think?" Lena asked, gesturing around the space. "I think you're going to change lives here." Victor set down the coffee and pulled her close. "I think women are going to walk through those doors feeling hopeless and leave feeling empowered, just like you did. I had help. You had a crisis that forced you to find strength you didn't know you had." He kissed her forehead. "I just provided resources. You did the real work." They'd settled into a rhythm over the past months, Victor splitting his time between his business interests and their growing family, Lena building her organization while managing motherhood. It wasn't always easy. There were still nights when Victor came home tense from dealing with his world, when Lena struggled with the reality of loving someone capable of violence. But they talked through it, negotiated boundaries, found ways to make it work. And Isla thrived. She had Victor wrapped around her tiny finger, lighting up whenever he walked into a room. He'd been there for her first smile, her first laugh, her first time rolling over. He'd pace the floor with her during teething, read her stories in Italian, sang her to sleep with the same lullaby he'd sung to his daughter 20 years ago. He was her father in every way that mattered, and Lena had started the process of making that legal. Daniel had signed away his rights months ago and had apparently disappeared to somewhere on the West Coast. Patricia occasionally sent cards and gifts, testing the boundaries Lena had set, but she'd accepted that her relationship with Isla would be limited and supervised. "I have something for you," Victor said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "For the opening, but also for everything else." Lena opened the box and found a key on a simple chain. "What's this?" "Key to my apartment in the city, the one I actually live in, not the corporate space I use for meetings." Victor's voice was carefully casual. "I want you and Isla to have it. Use it whenever you want, or move in permanently if you're ready. No pressure, no timeline, just know that my home is your home, officially." Lena looked at the key, at Victor's face, at Sophia pretending not to listen while entertaining Isla. This was a big step. Moving in together, combining their lives completely, making their relationship undeniably public. "Yes," she said simply. "We'd love to." Victor's smile was brilliant, unguarded, nothing like the controlled expressions he showed the world. He picked up Isla, swinging her gently, making her squeal with delight. "Did you hear that, little one? You're moving in with me, which means I get to teach you all sorts of things your mother won't approve of." "Like what?" Lena asked, amused. "Italian curse words, how to make proper espresso, the correct way to negotiate." He kissed Isla's cheek. "Important life skills." "She's 6 months old. Never too early to start." They spent the rest of the afternoon finalizing details for the opening, making lists of last-minute tasks, double-checking everything. When Isla got fussy, Victor took her out for a walk while Lana finished up, returning an hour later with a sleeping baby and reports that they'd walked past at least 7 restaurants he wanted to take Lena to. That evening, they drove back to the house, soon to be their former residence, and started the process of packing up the nursery. Victor's apartment was larger, with better security, and closer to both Lena's new business and his main offices. It made sense logistically, but it also felt like closing a chapter. "I'll miss this place," Lena said, looking around the nursery that had been Isla's first home. "It represented safety when I needed it most. You can come back anytime." Victor was carefully packing Isla's books. "I'm keeping the property. We might need it someday. For guests, for retreats, for when we want to escape the city. For when we have more kids and need the space." The question slipped out before Lena could stop it. They danced around the topic for months but never addressed it directly. Victor looked up from the books, and Lena saw hope and fear warring in his expression. "Is that something you want?" he asked carefully. "More children?" "Eventually, maybe, if you do." Lena sat down in the rocking chair. "I know it's complicated. Your history, your loss, would make me terrified and overprotective and probably insufferable." Victor set down the books and moved to kneel beside her chair. "But yes, someday, when we're ready, I'd like to have more children with you." "Really? Really?" He took her hand. "Being with you and Isla has healed something I thought was broken forever. The idea of expanding our family, of giving Isla siblings, of building something lasting together, it doesn't scare me the way it would have a year ago." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you. Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last few hours." Victor stood, pulling her up with him. "I love you too. You and our daughter and this impossible life we're building together." They finished packing late into the night, working side by side while Isla slept peacefully. By the time they fell into bed exhausted, Lena felt lighter than she had in years. The danger was over. The threats were neutralized. The future stretched ahead full of possibility instead of fear. 2 weeks later, Second Chances opened its doors to its first clients. The turnout exceeded every expectation. Women who'd heard about the center through word of mouth, through social workers, through the careful network Lena had built. They came scared and hopeful, desperate and determined, looking for the kind of help Lena wished she'd had when Daniel first disappeared. She met with each woman personally, listened to their stories, helped them develop plans for moving forward. Some needed job training. Some needed childcare. Some just needed someone to believe they could rebuild their lives. Lena provided all of it, drawing on her own experience, on the lessons she'd learned about survival and strength, and asking for help when you needed it. Victor came by at the end of the first day, bringing dinner and finding Lena exhausted but glowing. "How did it go?" he asked. "We helped 12 women today. 12 women who walked in feeling hopeless and left with resources, with plans, with someone in their corner." Lena leaned against him. "It's everything I hoped it would be. I'm proud of you." Victor wrapped his arms around her. "You took your worst experience and turned it into something that helps others. That's remarkable." "I had a good example." Lena looked up at him. "You could have stayed a man defined by loss and violence. But you chose to be more than that, to use your resources for good, to protect people instead of just controlling them. You showed me it was possible to transform." "We showed each other." Victor kissed her softly. "Come on, let's go home. Isla is probably driving Sophia crazy with the new tooth coming in." Home. The word settled warm in Lena's chest. They had a home now, a real one, built on honesty and trust and love that had been tested and proven strong. It wasn't the future she'd imagined a year ago when she was waiting tables and hiding her pregnancy. It was infinitely better and more complicated and more real. As they drove through the city, Lena thought about the woman she'd been that night at Celestine. Scared, alone, trying to work through labor because she didn't have any other options. That woman had been so small, so invisible, so convinced she had to handle everything herself. She'd been wrong. Strength wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about knowing when to accept help, when to stand your ground, when to fight, and when to let someone else fight for you. It was about building a life worth protecting and finding people worth building it with. 6 months passed in a blur of work and family and building their life together. Second Chances expanded, adding programs and staff, helping hundreds of women find their footing. Victor's organization stabilized under his continued leadership, with the remaining faction leaders accepting his relationship with Lena as settled fact. And Isla grew. She started crawling, then pulling herself up on furniture, then taking her first wobbly steps. Victor was there for all of it, documenting every milestone with the enthusiasm of someone who'd missed these moments before and refused to miss them again. On Isla's first birthday, they threw a party at the Brownstone, small, intimate, just close friends and family. Patricia came, tentatively rebuilding a relationship with her granddaughter under Lena's watchful eye. Sophia was there with Marcus, who'd apparently worked up the courage to ask her to dinner months ago. A few of Victor's most trusted people came. the ones who'd stood by him when he'd chosen personal loyalty over business convenience. Lena watched Victor help Hila navigate her first birthday cake, laughing as she got frosting everywhere, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. A year ago, she'd been in labor in a restaurant bathroom, terrified and alone. Now she was surrounded by people who loved her, building a business that mattered, raising a daughter who would grow up knowing she was wanted and cherished. Happy? Victor asked, coming to stand beside her while someone else took over cake duty. Incredibly. Lena leaned into him. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be too good to be true. It's not too good, it's just good, and it's real. Victor wrapped his arm around her waist. We've earned this, Lena, both of us. After everything we've been through, we get to be happy. I love you. The words came easier every time she said them. Thank you for showing up that night, for not walking away when you could have. Thank you for letting me stay. Victor kissed her temple. For seeing past what I am to who I'm trying to be, for giving me a second chance at the family I thought I'd lost forever. They stood together watching their daughter destroy her birthday cake, surrounded by people who'd become family, and Lena felt something settle deep in her chest. This was it. This was the life she'd fought for, the future she'd built from the ashes of her worst moments. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still complications from Victor's work, still moments when Lena struggled with the reality of loving someone from his world. But it was real and honest and built on a foundation strong enough to weather whatever came next. That night, after the party ended and Hila was asleep and they were alone in their apartment, Victor pulled out another small box. Again with the boxes, Lena teased, but her heart was racing. This one's different. Victor opened it to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light. I know we've built our life together without traditional steps. We moved in together before we'd been dating 6 months. We're raising a child who isn't biologically mine, but feels like she is in every way that matters. We've done everything backwards and out of order. Victor, let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. I don't need a wedding to make this real. I don't need a piece of paper to commit to you and Hila, but I want it anyway. I want to stand up in front of everyone and promise to love you, protect you, build a life with you. I want Hila to grow up knowing that her family is permanent and legal and unbreakable. He took a breath. So, Lena Moreau, will you marry me? Lena felt tears streaming down her face. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Victor slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, like everything else between them, unlikely, complicated, but absolutely right. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the brownstone, with Hila as their flower girl and Sophia as Lena's maid of honor. Marcus stood up for Victor, and Patricia cried through the entire service. It was simple and perfect and exactly what they both needed. During the reception, while Hila napped and guests mingled, Lena found herself standing at the window looking out at the city. Victor joined her, pulling her close. What are you thinking about? He asked. About how far we've come. How different everything is from what I expected. Lena turned to face him. A year and a half ago, I was a waitress who felt invisible. Now I'm married to you, running a successful organization, raising a daughter who's loved by so many people. It doesn't feel real sometimes. It's real. Victor kissed her softly. And it's just the beginning. We have years ahead of us. Building our family, growing second chances, watching Hila grow up, making mistakes and fixing them and learning together. Promise me something. Lena held his gaze. Promise me we'll always be honest with each other. Even when it's hard. Even when the truth is complicated. I promise. Victor's voice was solemn. No more secrets. No more hiding. Just us facing whatever comes together. They rejoined their guests, and the celebration continued into the night. Lena danced with Victor, laughed with Sophia, held Hila when she woke up fussy from her nap. She was surrounded by love and possibility and a future that felt limitless. Later, much later, after everyone had gone home, and Hila was asleep in her crib, and they were alone in their bedroom, Victor pulled Lena close. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For trusting me when you had every reason not to. For seeing the man I wanted to be instead of just the man I was. for giving me a family again. His voice was rough with emotion. You saved my life, Lena, in every way that matters. We saved each other, Lena corrected.
I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline. But you were drowning too, in grief and guilt in a life that had stopped meaning anything. We pulled each other out. Then let's make sure we never let go. Victor kissed her, deep and slow and full of promise. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, Lena agreed. And as they fell asleep wrapped around each other, Lena thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that first terrifying night to this moment of perfect peace. From strangers thrown together by crisis to partners choosing each other every single day. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been simple, but it had been real and honest and worth every hard moment. Because Lena Moreau, former invisible waitress, current nonprofit director, wife to a crime boss with a conscience, mother to a beautiful daughter, had learned something essential about life. The best stories weren't the ones that went smoothly. They were the ones where you fought for what mattered, where you chose love even when it was complicated, where you built something beautiful from broken pieces. And her story, their story, was just beginning. Years from now, when Isla was older and asked about how her parents met, Lena would tell her the truth. About the restaurant, and the rain, and the desperate night when a dangerous man became a savior. About fear and courage and learning that asking for help wasn't weakness but wisdom. About building a life that honored both their pasts and their futures. She would tell Isla about finding strength she didn't know she had, about accepting love she didn't think she deserved, about creating family from unlikely connections. And she would tell her daughter that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories started in the most ordinary places, with a waitress and a crime boss and one night that changed everything. Because that's what happened when you stopped being invisible and started being brave. That's what happened when you chose to live instead of just survive. That's what happened when you found someone who saw you, really saw you, and decided you were worth fighting for. And that, Lena thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, was the best kind of story there was. The kind with a happy ending that was really just a beautiful beginning.